In a world that walks the line, there's a rare few who think outside the box together for the crew. To break the equations, not bound to any rule. Exposing to the world the universe's own view. It takes the talent of the craftsman, it takes the mind of the fool, to make the vision realize energy and matter in a duel. To a break, to a duel.
Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Nathan, otherwise known as Old Man Bills, and we have Joe here with us today. Joe, what's up?
Hey, Nathan, everybody. How are you today?
I'm doing great, man. Just rocking and rolling in California with a bunch of fires, so glad to get away from that for a little bit.
Yeah, man. As if it's not hot enough in California as it is, right? And now you got to have like no water to put out the fires. Great.
That's right. We live in incompetence. That's California.
Amen, brother.
So, all right, Joe, let's talk about some projects out there or some tech that's been hidden from us, and then how it all works out.
Yeah, so what I kind of wanted to talk about today was why we're in the boat that we're in and whether or not there's any sort of way out. So, realistically, the government suppression has really been long established in the United States, at least, and I would say most of the modernized world by and large, for at least 75 years. And the way that it really started was with World War II and the Manhattan Project. When Eisenhower put forward the Manhattan Project, he created bureaucratic organizations within the federal government to oversee all of these operations, these research projects, and they were all obviously highly top secret classified and really even compartmentalized within the agencies that they were operated under, you know, the Department of Energy being one of the main ones for the Manhattan Project. And what they ultimately figured out from the Manhattan Project was how to actually conduct operations, keeping them super secret. And then at that time, it was reporting to the federal government. So it was a fairly clean operation. However, once Eisenhower got out of office and he warned of this with the CIA being introduced with the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, and everything like that, and the real first uprising of a major military industrial complex, he had warned that these entities working separate under such secrecy could pose a huge hazard, and that there has to be checks and balances to be able to make sure that there's oversight of this. And he was realistically like betrayed more or less once he left office, and all of the same exact research projects continued, became more secret, and became an entity in onto themselves. At a certain point in time, the government non-elected bureaucrats that ran these three-letter agencies, they figured out realistically not only how to launder money into their program, hide it, make sure that nothing shows for what they're actually up to and doing. They also found ways that even under congressional scrutiny or presidential scrutiny from the federal government, where the projects going on were largely even undiscoverable, because they were really assets of the private corporations in the military industrial complex that would have had no obligation to really make disclosure to or report to the federal government about anything.
So they hid it in plain sight with government businesses. They do, the businesses, the government, whatever, you know what I'm saying. The people the government does business with. They hit it right
Correct.
there. That's what they did. Sorry, long day.
Right. So it became a situation where more or less they were in cahoots with one another as a huge money laundering operation to push huge sums of money to these outside contractors, kickbacks for the bureaucrats, allowing for it, and holding the private contracts with them. to do these black budget projects, and ultimately the technology and the research that came out of these projects never had to be shared with anybody outside of these handful of privately held companies. So there's a lot of information that the privately held companies have that some government bureaucratic assets may be privy to, but realistically have no authority or jurisdiction over.
So all they could basically do is maybe cut the funding if they find it, but other than that, they have no right to tell them what to do.
More or less, but that raises the question then of who holds the cards when you have a company that has the greater power and technology than that of your own military might that you've purchased from them. It's sort of like, hiring a gunsmith for your defense, and he's providing you with firearms, but he has like machine guns. Well, he's been giving you muskets. You know about the machine guns, but now you're going to threaten him with a musket, and it becomes silly. So there becomes a real problem when you're looking at a balance of power that's privately held like that. So you could cut their funding off, but realistically that leads to all sorts of problems. That the end word is, well, okay, so if you're going to cut us off, we're going to get it from somewhere else, and what are you going to do about it?
Well, doesn't the DOD just go in and take it? Don't they just go in there with their little black vans, shut it all down, take everything you have, and leave you with nothing if you cross them?
That works when you're a regular person, a regular researcher, a regular company. That doesn't work when you're one of the types of companies that I'm talking about.
Okay.
They're far more powerful than, and that's what I'm saying is the shoe is on the other foot. The guys with the muskets are going to come in and tell the guys with the machine guns what to do, and they tell them to go get out the door before they light them up, and that's it. Because they have too much power. They can sit there and turn around and say, hey, listen, all this stuff that you funded that we discovered that you only have limited access to, we have full access to, we can sit there and give it away to any government out there. And what are you going to do about it? Find us treasonous? What are you going to do about it? Nothing. You can't do. What are you going to send tanks to us? Well, you can't do that, because do you understand what we hold? Can't do it.
They better have something really good, like majorly good, that they could do that. Otherwise, they don't stand a chance when the right people get involved. So, are they betting that the military won't go in there and do it, or that we don't have black ops teams that'll go in there and do it? I mean, because it would seem silly unless they walk into an incineration ray or something, you know what I mean? That they can't get in there and handle that.
Yeah, but when you realize that authority and your ability to control a situation is really a guise, and the authority that any government or person or authority has over anybody else is really only subject to the adherence and so on by the mass, great by and large. The thing is that you don't really need a mass when you're overwhelmingly overpowered, or because it doesn't have to be an attack. It could simply be a matter of blackmail and extortion.
Okay.
That's really what it doesn't have to be an attack. They'll sit there and say, you know what, that's fine. Come in here with your tanks, but we're gonna send all of our schematics of every single one of these projects over to one of your adversaries. Then they could actually be the one that plays the U.S. role of proxy war. And create turmoil. So you don't ever march anybody in anywhere when there's that type of high risk situation at hand. What are you going to do? Put them on trial? They just created a problem that you're never going to be able to solve.
No, I understand. I just think that the phone call would end with the awkward okay at the end. And if you don't mean that, you don't understand that you're fucked after that, then I guess you're done. You know what I mean?
Right. I think that if they were demanded compliance, that I think that they would comply, to be honest, but voluntarily. Like
Yeah.
I'm saying that the what we just talked about is highly like out there and speculative a little bit. It's not a scenario that would play out. I think that if they were told, hey, you have to give out do full reports on all your technology holdings, I think that they from the government, I think that they would comply,
Mm-hmm.
but they would willingly comply. And if they actually wanted to tell the government where to stick it, they could easily do that too. And there's rights in this country that actually protect them as well, like as far as having to disclose this, because none of this was done without the blessing and authority of some government agency. So it's not like they're in violation of any law.
No, I get it. Yeah, you're right. Wow.
Yeah, it's a very, very loaded subject, like that's the whole thing. But how it all came to be, like I said, really stems back from the Manhattan Project. All the technologies that came out of that were wrapped up and tucked away, kind of put out in different military projects slowly but surely over time in certain more practical and less obvious applications. One that we talked about in the past was the radar array in the nose, supposed radar array in the nose, of the B-2 bomber. That particular array lightens the aircraft by like something like 30%.
Oh, wow.
Just a little thing in the nose cone. That's what I've heard, but what do I know? That you may know about that airplane, but the fact is that airplane may be 40 years old, 50 years old at this point from time of development. But even the tech that it rolled out with that long ago is still classified.
Well, it's like Project Paperclip when they took all the Nazi scientists and brought them over. And we basically made a deal with the devils, and now we got the tech, but now we have their thought process going on behind the scenes as well. How to backstab somebody, how to make, government parts disappear. All that crap came from them, and we got all that too.
Yeah, we do, and it's hard for me to understand fully the full scope of what's going on right now, because there seems to be such a shift in what the general population, the general consensus is about the technology, and why we're starting to hear and accept the things that that we talk about regularly on this channel, as no longer really fringe as a matter of whether or not something like this could be in existence. It's whether or not it is yet. See, I think that the old mindset of the post World War II narrative was all like, oh yeah, well, we have all this best technology, look at how fast it's increasing, of course we're getting it. We might get it a little bit after NASA, we might get it a little bit after the military, but we're getting it. And that was a good way to sit there and cover up the fact that it advanced so rapidly that when it's like you're feeding somebody enough not to starve or complain, but they don't know that that chicken nuggets isn't the only food, that steak exists too. It's sort of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but wow. I lost my train of thought there, Joe. I'm sorry.
No, you're all right, Nathan.
No, I mean, I think what's going on is for a long time, they did a lot of the math, right? And they did a lot of the theory. And they've come to the realization lately that string theory is poo. And now that they've done that, they go, okay, what was the science that we didn't look at? And then they start looking at it, and they go back and they start looking at, well, these scientists now are going over here and they're building the correct stuff now. They go, okay, now that they're doing that, they're going to inevitably find it, because you can't start doing one side of the project without seeing the other. It's only going to keep you in the dark so long. And then they're going to ask questions and start writing papers because they all got to get to the patent office. So then they get denied the patents. And after you get denied them so many times, you find out that you were 100% right and they should have never been denied. And when you let the cat out of the bag and just say, this is how free energy is built, and here's the exact formula to get there, it gets kind of hard to hide it. Because then people are waking up going, I saw that anomaly and I did nothing about it. This guy's telling me it's real. I need to go revisit it. And then they start to build the stuff in their labs instead of just doing the math and like, wow, we got a whole new frontier on our hand.
Yeah, I mean, after hearing, pardon me, after hearing, your response to that too, and then just like realizing also that realistically the catalyst for people becoming over time more accepting of all this was, really the internet and our connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that if you believe something that was fringe, maybe you would only talk about it and try to make sense of it with one or maybe two other understanding people, for the understanding that, well, if you talk to your mother-in-law about about a UFO crash in 1947 that you think might have actually happened, she probably think that you were crazy. But with, the platform of the internet, one of the first forum groups that had popped up were conspiracy theory groups. As far as like forums go, they're as old as the internet itself. It's probably one of the first type of forums that existed. And, all the UFO people jumped right on that bandwagon and started sharing different evidence or photos or videos and experiences and so on that allowed it to expand beyond, your living room on a Saturday night when you had one too many and you said something crazy. So I think that really was beneficial and hurtful for it at the same time, because it was helpful because it makes all these new connections and allows the information to kind of spread. But with a whole entire new group of people that have no belief or exposure to this, seeing it for the first time, it also at first seemed to people like this was just a bunch of nutcases having nonsense talk on the internet, and it kind of made it more fringe than ever. It took a long time for that to start to regulate. And once the technology reached the point where it was apparent, you could send money without writing a check or going to the bank across the world, and it's in your account and in theirs instantaneously. You could have a live video chat with 6, 7, 8 different people simultaneously, real time, on an internet platform, which is incredible to think. You could communicate, beyond the earth, far past the moon and stuff with different and download images from satellites that are at the edge of our solar system. Once you start understanding that these things are known, accepted in practice, and here it is, and it's no secret, you start realizing that a lot of these more crazy ideas start to become so much more plausible, and maybe that led to the acceptance of it. But I think that there had to be something going on that now became more the time of testing society.
You think it's a test, not the technology?
I think it's an all-in-one, to be real. I mean, it's the technology, but it's also the presence of the technology now. If they didn't want you to know, you wouldn't know. I think that one of the biggest black budget projects that ever comes to mind that's still speculated on today is the SR-72, the Aurora. Right? The Aurora project was like whispered about in the 80s, and you figured that, well, if they're retiring the SR-71, it certainly doesn't have no replacement. And they knew that the capabilities of the satellites didn't equal the quality of the material coming off of the SR-71, even though it was 20 some odd years old at the time. And you just knew that technology had advanced so far that there had to be something else in its place. You have all these, aviation experts sitting there saying, "Hey, listen, I saw something that's it's an aircraft, but it's like no other aircraft I could identify, and I could identify any aircraft."
Mm-hmm.
And they kept that under lock and key for so long, and they still haven't confirmed or denied it, but it seems pretty widely accepted that there was something going on with it at this point. Yeah, but that's exactly what they do. They just do whatever they're going to do. They deny it, and some things they'll never come clean about. Other things, like, they will. But just by the fact that we're looking at it 40 years later and we still don't know if the Aurora existed, they're pretty good at keeping these things under lock and key.
Yeah, I think technology-wise, Joe, a long time ago, they figured out if they're going to make a field to go around the craft, that they inherently created time dilation inside of it, and it freaked them out. And I think they just stopped at that point and said, we can't let any more out, because that's a massive step for humanity. And it's absolutely true when you build the technology.
Right.
So when they start figuring that stuff out and you look at it and you go, oh my God, you just can't do that. That leads to too many problems. Some inventor out there is going to figure out how to push it too far, learn something more. I mean, it freaked me out when my gravity flyer is sitting there on my table and it's turning my computer in different labels. It's going, okay, now you're on Google, now you're on Yahoo, and it's going through the path of all of them. And it keeps telling me I have a new USB connected and everything else. And it's literally talking to the little things on there like it's a mouse and telling it what to do based on the frequency. And I'm going, okay, we got a problem here. If they found that in the lab, then they found out that their room itself is a containment unit for it, and that all of that right there changes time in some way. It's game over, man. They're not letting that out. They're not telling anybody that.
I mean, letting it out, no. See, that's where I agree with you. They drew a line in the sand about the letting it out part. But what you said about them getting kind of like freaked out, scared about it a little bit, and saying, you know what, this isn't what we're messing with, I disagree with that. We're talking about the same exact people that deployed a hydrogen bomb, not knowing if it would light up the Earth's atmosphere.
Oh no, I didn't mean
and they did it anyway.
I didn't mean they weren't going to play with it. They meant
they were playing
not letting it out the information so you can play with it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, they were definitely playing with it. They were like, take the kids out of the room. We're definitely having some fun in here. Leave us alone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. And the effect that it has on the computer. And it's like, I mean, I could think of a handful of mechanisms right off the top of my head that would interfere with it in that exact kind of way. But like the most fringe of it, and like the kind of most, I don't want to say alarming, but if it is doing something that's with purpose, that means that it's sentient. So that's where I'm going with that.
I don't think it's sentient at all. I think it's one of the rare times that you can understand frequency at a distance, that when you get the exact same frequency, it'll change something. And frequency has energy in it. And I think people misunderstand that. It's absolutely full of energy. And it's not that, how do I say this? It's not freakish when something goes off on your computer because it's getting an energy wave, okay? Because anything can saturate and do it, you know what I mean? It's how a transistor works. It saturates at a certain point, so that's not a problem. It's the frequency in which it saturates, which is basically the on and off of your transistor. It's what's worrisome. If it's targeting certain transistors in there to do certain things, that's when it becomes a problem, because if you knew the frequency code of everything, You don't need a hacker.
Nope.
You don't need anything. So when you get the story about the UFO sitting over the missile silo and everything in there, the guy's freaking out because he didn't turn the keys, but that thing's definitely hot. You know what I mean? Somebody's up there in a UFO turning this stuff on. They definitely discovered it. Now,
Right. It's like kind of the flip side of the coin of an EMP. It's not an EMP. It's in resonance, therefore part of it remotely. And because it's part of it remotely, it can then be manipulated remotely. And if you manipulate it in accordance with a certain operation, then it's going to undergo that operation regardless of the heart of any sort of software hard stops, because the hardware is going to trump the software on it.
Well, yeah. So think about this. If you sat in your lab, right, and that's all you wanted to do was frequency manipulation based on what you know, right? You could take and figure out everything on a motherboard and how it operates based on every frequency. So you'll generate your own code. It won't look anything like your ones and zeros at all. It'll just, it's lines of frequency, and that's it. And by manipulating those, you could just absolutely tear through somebody's system from the outside without a problem, and they'll never know it was you. It's crazy when you think about it, but there's also other side effects when you start dealing with some of this stuff. And I don't blame the government to think that the people weren't ready for it. Like, yeah, if I told you, hey, I could sit you in your room and then it'll be 3 hours difference between you and the outside world, you're going to be like, well, I don't know that I'm ready for that. You know what I mean? Maybe in the 50s when they're, worried about bomb shelters and we just set off a big nuclear explosion, maybe not the time. Cuban Missile Crisis, we get a little worse, and then, oh, by the way, we could do this.
Well, I have an interesting, and it's a little paradoxical of a question with it. But if you have an isolated time dilation zone where your time is moving different than your outside your room, right? So let's say that it's, speeding you up, so to speak, right? So inside your room, because that's the bubble, more or less, you're 3 hours ahead. You're 3 hours behind, I guess, right? Everything else. But then what happens when you exit the room?
Then you exit at the time of the outside world.
So there's no.
Is there a snapback effect? I don't know if there is.
Right. That's where I'm going with it. So whatever happened in your room during that time happened in that room during that time. Your clocks are reading different. You walk outside the room, the clock's different. But are you what happens when you move out of the bubble is what I'm saying.
Well, it's kind of hard to distinguish if it's daylight when you go in and daylight when you go out. It just feels like, man, I've been here working, but it feels like no time has passed.
Yeah.
And you walk out and it feels like no time, you know what I mean? It feels like a lot of times passed. Like you just look at it and you go, man, it's been in there 4 hours. It felt like 20 minutes.
See, I'm a firm believer of the mind being the number one experiencer, so to speak, of, everything, but the human brain, separate of the mind and consciousness, but still like a connecting mechanism, so to speak. I think that the human brain is capable through its own neurological connections and neural pathways and so on of actually creating different time dilation fields, which is sometimes why you feel like time is dragging, or sometimes you feel like time is going by so quickly, depending on different states of mind that you're in and the frequencies at which you're operating at. But the locality of that is all subject to your experience in your head. So it doesn't really affect anything outside of it. And you're still with it the same.
So
Does that
here's
make sense? That would be a mechanism for why we experience time differently.
yes, but on top of that, I think the human body itself, I want to say this, has to be turned on in order to do those higher functions. And I don't think that it is, but it also has to be a learned effect. So you have to be able to not only turn it on, but be able to have the neural pathways in the right place to make the mechanism work. So you can't just do it right now. Your mind won't be able to. Gerald always says you have to activate your light body. And I 100% agree that you have to activate it, maybe not to the point where you're leaving the earth, but to the point where you can manipulate things in your mind to change something. So that's just my opinion on it, because I always look at things more of a mechanism than it is a spiritual understanding. I think history puts spiritual understandings in here, like this, crystal, scalar, things of that nature, so that people will actually be able to get to them one day, because they'll have all the practices and the procedures, but you have to turn it on first. It's like knowing crystal is conductive in water, but you don't know to necessarily put it in water right away, right? So you would know that, but you also wouldn't know how to amplify it. So you have the right techniques, every one of them in place, but maybe you just didn't turn it on yet. And that's all it is. It's just a simple programming to turn it on.
Yeah. I mean, I try to bridge the gap, same as Gerald does, between what I experience in my own practices and, metaphysically and spiritually and things of that nature, but also in conjunction with what we know is going on biologically in our brain, but then also in conjunction with what we know about those that biologics that also is directly analogous to other phenomena that we experience with, like, for instance, what you're doing. So when you connect the dot right there, you kind of see it always goes full circle, for the most part. And that's how I try to speculate on these things, to kind of connect the dots. And I agree with you, in order to actually control to any sort of meaningful degree, the process that I described, if you want to have full control over something like that, that's going to be exactly what you said. That's the light body activation. That's the practice. Once the light body activation has occurred, it's being able to control the flow of natural energy in your atmosphere and your body, and equilibrium with it to a degree, and being able to control that. It's 100% accurate, but at the same time, not everybody has kind of experienced that. And, I think that there's waking examples of the everyday person and their experiences where you could still look and say, hey, you might not be tuned in, you might not be in control of it entirely, but when you experience something like this, it's actually the same mechanism. It's just not so much in your control. Yeah.
No, I think all the teachings are 100% right. I don't disagree with that at all, Joe. I think they're right. I just think they're missing the final aspect, you know what I mean, of turn it on. That's it. Just that last little bit of knowing. And to me, it just adds more to what you're doing. It's not trying to just diminish anything. Hey, one of the things that came up yesterday in tech that they definitely suppressed was, okay, we live in scalar, and this goes to topography and stuff like that, and height and the height of everything, okay? And it goes to every height has a frequency, and every height has a temperature. And we know this. We go up anywhere in our world on a mountain, we get colder temperatures, right? And that has everything to do with the scalar field. What people don't realize is they go, oh, here was the technology. Put the pole 15 feet in the air, run a wire across it, you get energy from it. You go, well, okay, atmospheric energy, we understand chronomotors, we could do it. A little bit different, but you put a plate up there and it's taking in all that energy. What if I just told you that if you match the frequency of the plate up there with the frequency of the level of scalar you're at, you can get all the energy to come to you? That's something that they've suppressed for a long time. That if you do that, it's a draw for the negative in the earth to pull that energy as well. So if you put both of those into a machine over here that has the technology to pull each one, you can pull energy out for free all day long.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's one of the ones that came up yesterday with Supressed. I thought it was very interesting. And it's absolutely true. I mean, you could do these tests and they all prove that they're working.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think directly related to that, which is something definitely not spoken about enough, is the phenomena that most subterranean or caves, if you have like a cave or a subterranean like void or anything like that, and it's past a certain distance, depending on what your outside conditions are, that it's almost always, it reaches a point of equilibrium at just about the same temperature, like right around like 56 degrees. So whether you're in New York during the winter or the summer, in the same cave or a cave in France, with totally different weather, totally different external conditions, you go inside the cave, it's 56 degrees. It doesn't matter what time of year, doesn't matter whether you're here or there. And it's like this incredible phenomenon. And it has to do with these internal structures not being subject to the same field energies and field variances and fluctuations, combined with having huge thermal masses to isolate it. And when it reaches that isolation equilibrium, that's what the temperature is. Yeah, that's why they age cheeses and wines and things like that in caves a lot of times, because no matter the cave, it's like 56 degrees. Plus or minus a degree or two, I suppose, but that's pretty much where it's at, and it has to do with the resonance of Earth.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm reading the chat too. I think that's a fascinating thing, because it goes to like why these animals are digging holes in my yard and staying under the earth, and it's always warm under there regardless of the surface temperature. So I just wanted to clarify this scalar field. Okay, here's the thing. When you start working with tech like this, one of the things you're going to find that's going to make a scalar field, and they're going to go at heights, and they're going to go based on the temperature. So remember, when you do your temperatures and stuff in how you build things, as your voltage goes up, okay, your amperage goes down. So the heat level goes down, so it gets colder, right? Well, the opposite is true. Bring down the voltage, and then your aperture goes up, and you get hotter. It's that simple, but it works in the same way on levels. So I could tell you 100% for certain that the energy that we're putting out will stack and multiply if they're a different frequency. That's how I know it's scalar, because it doesn't do anything else but that. And scalar works in frequency and levels. And some people say it doesn't drop off. That's not true. It goes out just like your planets and your sun. Your sun goes out, it's a null zone. Then your planet takes over, in that area, for that area of the planet, then a null zone. Then it goes on to the next one. But the amount of energy, that it puts out is based on the frequency of that planet, based on the frequency put out by the sun. So when the sun starts acting up, putting out different frequencies, it directly affects every planet. So that's why they call it scalar. And every one of them, on how they're paced out, is based on the scalar. They're based on where they are to the sun, and that's the frequency they have. You'll find it all throughout the whole solar system. It does not change. Now, when you have a second star, this is why most solar systems have them, you have two power plants that do the same thing. Now, each one of your planets could be based on this one or this one in how it works. So most of the time, your primary sun has at least 100 frequencies in it. Your planet probably has 24, and then it hits on different one of your frequencies. When you get like Venus, the frequency is different, and your planet goes to complete poo. And
right. I mean, the frequency of the planet, even just like the native frequency, like for instance on Earth, like Schumann's resonance, that's a fluctuating figure too. I mean, it averages out around that, 7.8 or whatever it is. But my understanding is like right now with the increased solar activity going on, that Schumann's resonance is more like closer to 9, which is that's a pretty significant difference, since you're talking when you're talking ELF waves. I mean, that 2 extra or 1.5 extra oscillations per second is like a mega increase.
Yeah,
it's a huge increase. It's like a 15-20% increase,
especially because it's probably in the cold zone. So it's not in the hot zone. So it's just going to make the hot areas even hotter. So, yeah, it's going to cause all kinds of problems, man. So
yeah, it definitely could, especially if the internal resonance of Earth, toward the core and like the inner structure, which would be directly affected as well, because it's not like these rays stop at the surface and that's it. I mean, that they go and they affect everything.
Yeah.
If that were to change and not in tune with that going on atmospherically or at or near the surface, I mean, it could really have some devastating effects on the surface of the Earth, like just being out of residence.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it changes over time as well. I don't think it stays the same all the time. Like if we went back in the past, it wouldn't be the same.
Definitely not.
No.
Too many variables for it to stay the same.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Toymaker keeps saying, it's not a field, it's an idea. I'll be honest with you, and I said this in my last video. They have 3 different descriptions for describing almost the same thing. And they say, okay, transverse longitudinal, Steinmetz dielectric, you know what I mean? And then you get into scalar and you go, all this stuff. Guys, it's all the same thing. You could call it 3 different names. It's all based on the same primary process that propagates all of them. That
happens to be true. I was going to play devil's advocate with you on that and be like, well, there is a difference between field and a directed propagation, but there kind of isn't, because they all have the same attributes. So I kind of stopped myself. They're the same attributes in regards to whether it's directional, like outward or in a certain direction from the point, or whether it's outward in all directions in a more toroidal shape. Now you're just talking about the geometry of the field propagation as opposed to whether or not it's a field, because even scalar, even though it's a very like not susceptible so much to interference when you're talking about either only longitudinal waves, pure scalar, or scalar like ELF waves, where interfering with an ELF wave becomes extraordinarily difficult. It'll go on and on and on undisturbed pretty much, indefinitely, I suppose. They still have gradients that occur on certain axes. So it's still a gradient form of energy, and you're still going to have a primary focal point of probability for that wave function, where it's going to be most powerful and likely to be. If that makes sense. Powerful and likely to be.
No, it does. But you also have to look at, like you said, the geometry of it. Is it a sphere inside of a sphere inside of a sphere, like a Russian nesting doll? I mean, are we seriously not understanding that you can go from one energy type to the next energy type. And even though you call them two separate things, they're built from the same core product. I mean,
Well, when you say we're, I know you're not talking about me and you.
no, I'm just saying
'Cause
we
I
are like
understand
a
that.
humanity. Because as soon as I had so many people, as soon as I said the hairpin circuit, right, and I interjected different geometry, it freaked people out. They were like, there's no way it works that way. There's no way it works that way. Well, what's the defining way that it works? What is the process that you're building? Not how is it built, but what is the process that you're building? What are the defining attributes of that system? And well, the answer was it flipped the dielectric and the magnetic fields. That was the answer. And I know that it did it. And here's the thing. There's a reason I know it did it. Because when I ran my gravity flyer, every time I put my magnetic field or my Tesla coil field on both the discs, it did one thing. It made like a scalar energy, okay? And then I put my static electricity, which is two flybacks in series, which produces static electricity, very high voltage, very low amperage. It pushed that field all over the room immediately. I could throw it anywhere I wanted to and control it, okay? But when I reversed it and put the static electricity on both discs, and then I put my Tesla coil from the center rod, which is in my scalar, held it right in. Now, I still get energy at a distance, and it's a different temperature between each one of them. And I know what I have. I know that it's flipping the field inside and out based on where the energy fields are. So when I saw it coming out of there, I said, okay, now we're playing some fun here. I know exactly what we're doing. I know exactly which field we're in and why. So it couldn't be static. It had to be a reversal. And it's because one field is holding in the other. And that's what people don't understand. I didn't just do one test and call it a day or read one book and call it a day. I did the test to reverse it to find out what it did. And then
You're doing the work.
Yeah, once I found out what it did, it's game over. There's no book out there that's going to tell you the answer that I have sitting right in front of me. I'm watching it do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally
well,
different.
okay, so I have something I'm working on that I actually wanted to share with you, and I'll probably link up with you to figure out what I'm going to do with it after, or maybe even send you some of it and let you fiddle around with it.
Nice.
But what I did was I took two pieces of 14 gauge stranded wire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I twisted it, make sure it's nice and tight and stuff, and then I started tying them together in like a snake knot, like a unity knot.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea of tying it in that form is that they're equal and intertwining mirrored images of each other on both sides continuously over and over again.
Absolutely.
So and it actually forms the sacred geometry shape of like a Celtic knot.
Mm-hmm.
So you just wrap Celtic knot, tucking them up and into each other where they're just continuously following that same pattern. And once I get like a nice big length of it, we could talk. But that proposition is like, imagine how hard it is to tie, that particular knot out of stranded wire.
Oh, I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a slow go process, but once I get enough of that together, I want to figure out something to do with that, because I think that it would have a very, very interesting wave propagation pattern as far as its interference.
Okay, here's a question for you, Joe.
All right. Did I feel the pulse? Sorry, it's very, very, very small on my phone. Did you feel the pulse at that phi level when you hit it in the twisting? Oh, I know what he's talking about, because we were talking about this on the side. No, because I did it with my screw gun, and I saw the different oscillations where it was steady, and then it did kind of give a couple like extra little pulses at a slower rate. But I honestly didn't want to break the stranded, wire, because it was starting to get tight.
Hmm.
So, if I were to have done it by hand and had like direct tension on it and done it with like a spindle where I was just twisting it by hand, I probably undoubtedly would have been able to pick up on that. But with the screw gun, it just didn't go through the screw gun. There was too much vibration being introduced in by that. Because what Eighth Sinner had recommended, because I was talking to him about this, was he wanted me to see if I can twist the wire to a phi ratio. So that made perfect good sense to me. All things being aligned like that. To mathematically have calculated it, I was like, I don't know that the juice is worth the squeeze on that. And then that's when he told me, he's like, yeah, but you'll be able to sense it. You'll be able to tell. It'll give like a little twitch, kind of letting you know that that's the rate of spin that it's comfortable at, which actually made sense to me. And I was like, okay. But I wasn't able to sense it.
Wasn't able to feel it.
No, I saw, like I said, I did see when it kind of equalized, then it gave like a little extra jump. And that's right about the time that I stopped anyway.
Be interesting to throw a DC pulse to that and see if there's any cancellation of fields in it, or if it's flowing just right.
Just kind of hoping for both, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does.
I'm looking for cancellation and flow. That's it. But I was thinking about having it be like a 2-channel thing where, I'm sending it opposite directions. It'll still, so it'd have like interwire torsion.
Well, hopefully you get a diode effect. That would be cool. Where it, allows the energy in, but won't allow it to back up. That'd be totally awesome if you can get that effect out of it. Yeah,
I have what the energy would be doing in my head, like kind of how it interacts, but how what it's doing in my head and what it does in practice is yet to be seen.
Yeah, this, by the way, that field with the green glow, that's something totally different. That's not scalar. That's a whole different project. I'm sorry to say that. I know you read it that way, but it's not that way. I could tell you that. I've had many conversations about what makes that green stuff, and it's
what makes the green stuff? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, it's how you create your dipole, and that's about what I could tell you from the conversation with Gerald and I, without going into something that he asked me not to say anything about. So, but yeah, it's all in that and creating of that, and then. Yeah.
Does it have to do with nitrogen?
No.
No?
You don't need any of that stuff. Look.
Well, you don't need it. I mean, it's just there.
I'm going to be honest with you, man. There's so many things you could do with just wire and understanding that some of this extra stuff they like to put in there, it doesn't work. It's not needed. A lot of people, when they get into this, they try to go things as the effect, and they think it's the cause. So if I say this thing gets colder when you run it, right? Well, that's the effect. That's not the cause. So running cold air through the center of it won't do anything because you're just putting effect into it. Okay. I have to deal with the cause. Why is it doing it? Well, the cause is because of the rotation through the field, right? And by putting cold air down the center, it won't help that rotation one bit. So it won't create the thing you're looking for in the effect because you didn't find out where the cause was. So that's why I do things in reverse, because I want to know what was the detail that created the cause, right? Now, when I do that, I can better understand the project and say, in reverse, this should work, right? That's the main cause, and that what makes this whole thing go.
You know, that was in life. That was one of my first realizations that I had, that kind of, was so meaningful. It's carried through, to this day, is that the answers are much easier than the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. The answer to anything is almost always out there and attainable. It's just asking the right question that becomes the difficult thing. And I noticed that through myself, but then also through observing others, just like in troubleshooting conversations, how it's like, wait a second, but you're not dissecting this enough, and you're not asking the right question. So therefore you're not looking at the right thing. You got to go further.
Sometimes there's a lot of things in an experiment that you're looking at as the cause, and it's not at
Well, it could
all.
be the cause of something else, like, as
Well,
it could be the cause of something else, but is not the cause of itself.
it's not the triggering part. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? It's not that part that defines the experiment. Some of this stuff is just like, I threw all this stuff together and it works this way, but I don't know why I threw the rest of the stuff in there. And somehow in my mind it made sense, but that's not. I could shorten it to this little area right here, and we'd still be good. You know,
The deeper of an understanding you have as to why, the better people typically are at things and understanding things. That's what it boils down to every single time. We all do things in our daily life that we do because we know that they work and we know that they're effective, and we never even know why or question why they work. It just does. So it's like, well, this is the way I do it. Why do you do it that way? Because it works. Okay. Well, why does it do that? Well, I don't know. It's like, why do you char your steak for the Maillard reaction? Well, because during this chemical process that undergoes with the proteins at the surface, it creates a flavor difference that is the desirable flavor of what you're trying to achieve. That's why. So now that you know what it's actually doing at the surface level, different things that you could do to then manipulate that itself. And now there's 4 different ways or 5 different ways to effectively sear a steak, each which would taste different than the other, because you understand what that means. And it's simple. It's a dumb example, but it's simple.
it's why you go to the best bakers in the world to get the right stuff, right?
That's it.
They just got the understanding down. And when you tell them what you want, they go, yeah, I got you. I already know. That's what's unbelievable. But that's what it does. So I think Toymaker was talking about another thing in there. I think there's more parts. And as soon as I look at it, I'll know. Because sometimes there's things I don't want to say, but they'll come true as soon as I see it, because I know exactly what I'm looking for. Because I don't show a lot of the experiments in here, though I show a lot. You know what I mean? But it should really trouble you when I sit there and light stuff up all day. And I haven't seen anybody else figure it out. They don't have it. I mean, you could read all you want, but nothing beats that experiment. So I manipulated quite a few things in here. So anyway, enough of that. All right. What else did they start suppressing out there?
I mean, it's like we kind of briefly talked about. The weird thing about conspiracy theories, cover-ups, and all this secret stuff is that some of it's so outlandish that even when it's said out loud, nothing needs to be done about it, or has been needed to be done about it, because it was so fringe, and the more time that passes, the more conspiracies that are ultimately found to just be true in fact. And I think that the one thing that blows my mind the most out of all of it is the fact that most of the conspiracies, no matter whether it's a Roswell or reverse engineering of the tech after Roswell and that progression, telecommunications and weaponry that they did in top secret that they never released, whether it's weather manipulation or mind control or substances or spirituality or cause of life or any of these things, they're all oddly connected and fluid with one another, which is like once you understand how it all progressed and how one thing led into the other, even a conspiracy as deep as like the assassination of JFK is potentially connected directly to all this because of his adverse relationship with the CIA and his wanting to actually, they say the Bay of Pigs and all that, and how he was going to make peace with Cuba, and that might have had what to do with it too. And that's very likely the case. But he also, because of that adverse relationship that he had with some of these internal bureaucratic organizations, there was also information that he became privy to that he wanted out there too, didn't understand why we weren't using it for good. And it's been said that that was one of the main reasons that they took him out. And for a long time, even the idea that that JFK was an inside job was a conspiracy. I don't think that there's too many people that believe today that it being an inside job is even controversial.
Yeah.
And that's mainstream. Like, I mean, that's it. People know that something was up with it, and but mind you, what that means, and mind you, why they don't come out with that.
It means that we haven't had a president like him that would bring those things out until now. That's what it means. They all bent the knee and said, "No thanks, I'd rather live and keep getting paid."
Yeah, and but you got to remember something that changed, and this is looking outside the direct lens. Something that changed once JFK was assassinated. Okay, all of the technology advancement that used to be part of like inside popular mechanics, and there was times in the 1950s that they said that they admitted private companies are developing anti-gravitics. Private companies are changing the way transport, that it's well in development, proof of concept works. This is sort of how it works, without giving away too much to, because at that time it was a private market thing. And then right at that same exact time that JFK was assassinated, all that narrative disappeared out of media. So you no longer opened up your popular mechanics and saw anything about it. But they said that they were probably at most like 5 years away from having a marketable product that utilized that technology, and that was back in the early 60s. So right after JFK went down and then all that information became suppressed, I don't know how read in any government official really was on any of these technologies. And that's the one thing, because people will say, and I don't claim to be some sort of expert on this or anything for that matter, as everybody that watches the shows know, I claim to be an expert on nothing, but from what my understanding is that the president of the United States does have the ultimate security clearance and can actually authorize any information at any level of classification to be declassified, and he would declassify that information by virtue of simply saying it in a declassified setting. Okay, that's my understanding, that nobody has a higher clearance than him, even in these compartmentalized groups. Now, here's where they get you. They're black projects. Okay, they don't, and the trick to the black project is that the name is unspoken. So you don't know that the project exists. And if the project does exist, it may exist in 6 different places under 6 different names. And to get the full picture of everything, the president of the United States would literally have to say, I want the files on this black project, that black project, this black. He would have to know what to ask for. And that's where that wraps up into the information's there. It's the question. When you don't know something exists, you don't know to ask about it. If you don't ask about it, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get read in on it, because guess what? They decided you don't need to know.
The only way we find it is when somebody slips up and says the name in a memo when they shouldn't say it. That's when we usually catch them.
Whistleblowers, memos, something referring to it in an unclassified document or referring to it in a classified document that makes it into the hands of somebody else is like, well, what's this? And now it's in the ether. Now it can be asked about because it's in the ether. But of course, they probably have they're resistant to that too, because you could sit there and say, give us everything you know about anti-gravitic technology. And they'll give you everything that they know about anti-gravitic technology in not Black Project context. And because you don't know about it, you think you have a full file.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Or it's so broken up that it's in 6 different places that you have to connect the dots of seemingly unrelated things to realize that all these 6 projects are actually just one project.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one project, Joe, that I think that they suppressed forever, and I kind of got sick of it. So when I found the answer, I just put it out there because it's not harmful to people and it's free. So when you get to 80% on your hot project, right, and you're running through hot energy, and what I mean by that is your circuits are all getting hot, you could see all of it in there, right? If all I told you is you just need that last little bit, right, and I can get you that by pulling the negative through your entire circuit. Now I can tell you, because I pulled the negative through your circuit, I changed the energy in your system. Now I can amplify it by double by hitting the piezo disc. Well, that's free, right? That doesn't hurt anybody, but that gives you your free energy. It's everything everybody ever wanted. And I was doing the test on it. I got one of those little infrared deals, okay, for my camera. I put it in. I was recording it. And my rodent coil, I hooked it up to my Tesla coil, and I put it through the rod in the center. And I looked it on there because I wanted to make sure, hey, I'm saying it's cold. Is it cold? That thing, it was indistinguishable from the background at the level of temperature. So when it sat right on the melamine on my table, it was that same temperature. It was not the temperature of the circuit. The lines, once they got to my actual Tesla coil, you stopped seeing heat. Everything in that Tesla coil showed that cooler temperature. And you could see the rod clear as day right down the center of the whole thing. It was like it peeled back the layer and said, hi, I'm here. It was like, wow, okay. Now we know we got something, right? This thing, I mean, you could still make out it's a rodent coil. It's a camera. You can still make out that it's there. But if you were just looking at the colors and stuff like that and temperature, no. And I just barely started it up. You get 2 minutes of footage on this thing, and then it cuts off. So I guess the test is, can I run it for 5 hours, and then will it come up with the same temperatures? You know what I mean? So it's one of the interesting tests that I got going on. But I just found it was totally awesome that, no, there's no heat in this stuff. It presents as heat when you touch it because it'll burn you. And I think that's where people get it, because when you flip the fields, right, and you go inside the other, well, remember, you got your amperage field out there, so the amperage field's going to have heat, and it's going to feel like a radiation heat. That's exactly where it is. So what I have trouble with sometimes in Steinmetz is when he says the dielectric versus the magnetic. Is it really those terms, or is that backwards? And we didn't realize it because we never created the amperage part of it. You know what I mean? Right. It's never been exposed to the outside. So do we have it wrong? Because as soon as you get rid of the dielectric field, then everything on it that we associate with magnetism is gone. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. So is it reversed? Is it backwards and we didn't realize it? You know what I mean? That's what the crazy thing is, because if it's not there, then you go, everything I associate with a magnet is now gone. So where's my Lenz's law? My Lenz's law is gone. You get what I'm saying? It doesn't make any sense. It's like you said it was a magnetic field, so I'm expecting a field that's going to push another magnet, right? That's the assumption here. There's no field to push a magnet. it's absolutely inert to a magnet. The magnet will do nothing to it.
Well, all of these manifestations of energy fields has two sides to the coin. So any whether it's a magnetic field, there's two sides to that coin too. We know that, right? And like when you're like plasma, I think that's an easy one too. You could have hot plasma, you could have cold plasma, and it's got to be, or else there's no equilibrium to be reached. The way that they suppressed this technology, aside from going after the people creating it and so on and making it fringe, and they really did that through the patent system.
Oh, they did.
Because the popular one that everyone knows is, well, if they deem it to be an issue of national security, either safety wise or economically, that they can take your patent and pay for it or whatever they do, and then that's it. You have no rights to it and you can't use it, you can't sell it except for to the government, blah blah blah. That's the one everyone knows. But that system got burnt up a long time ago, because like anything else, you could only patent these certain concepts one time, or else there's no point of a patent at that point. Anybody could just put in for it, right? So all this stuff had been bought up. So what they had to start doing to actually deter these things from coming in is they restrict what you can patent as far as efficiency levels, and they claim it under physics. They say, well, the math says that because of thermodynamics, XYZ is not possible, right? So one example that my understanding was from my reading, and I've seen it in multiple sources, is that if you wanted to just patent a high efficiency solar panel, for instance, okay, you can't do it.
No.
Because
30%?
they reject all applications for high efficiency solar panels at 20% or 25%. So once you cross that threshold of 20 to 25% efficiency catch to production, they say, nope, it's not possible, because in the laboratory, we failed to get any better results than this. So you couldn't have figured out anything better because the math isn't there. And they automatically reject those patents, limiting solar technology, for instance, which is not. See, we perceive it as an inefficient and wasteful way to produce energy, because it is. It's a huge marketing scheme, is what it is. But if you had solar panels that are 100% efficient, your idea would change of that entirely. It's what it boils down to. Your idea of how long it would take to charge an entire a huge battery cell to last you a week for every day of sunlight that you get. All of a sudden, then it's no problem. But they got to cap it at this, because they need you to sit there and suck power every single day. So so you're not off grid. And a lot of times when they sell these, it's under government programs, right? Government programs with contractors. Yeah, I'm sure your locally elected congressman probably owns stock in these companies.
Yeah, it's worse than that. We get solar panels in California that tie them back into the grid.
Yep.
Give you a bill you cannot read, and then they don't give you any backup system. So they don't offer you a battery. You know what I mean? They will not do that. And you're left without power when all the power goes off again. Yet you have these solar panels sitting on your roof, which you should be able to tie into and use. And nothing's more irritating than that. So,
correct. That's how it is in New York, by the way. And on my old house, it was a big house, and we used a lot of power. It made sense for me to go through that state program to get the panels, whatever have you. And I forget how big the system. It was a huge system, though. I think it was like 18 or 20 kilowatts. Like, it was big system, And they basically just make you loan, put a loan on the panels, and then your meter reads forwards and reverse. That's what. So during the daytime, during the summer, you see the thing cooking in reverse. Not really because it's digital, but you'll see the number dropping down. Then come nighttime and stuff, all of a sudden now you're consuming.
No, I understand that, but the
Yeah,
bill's
but I'm
not
saying, but
readable.
it's to feed the grid. So I asked about, okay, so what if the power goes out? I'm good then? No. Like you said, if you go through the state program, no. Now, the solar company told me on the side, but if you want to pay out of your pocket, we'll set you up with battery banks and a switch.
Yeah.
So you'd have to pay, and it was, by the way, they wanted like 10 grand for it. And I was like, you know what? It's fine. My power doesn't go out all the time, so it's okay. But you flip a switch and then bang, bank battery. Yeah. But yeah, the only way to actually do it through the government programs is to be hooked up to the grid and for somebody else to be consuming the energy that you produced.
Yeah, I don't like these systems at all. I'd rather have the power bank and the batteries and all that stuff, Joe, to be very honest with you. That's just me. But then again, I'd start playing with it and messing with it, and probably you wouldn't use it properly.
Well, not for anything. I mean, you should play with it and mess with it, and but do it on the small scale, well knowing that it's a scalable operation.
I told my wife
panel, and
I told my wife wanted like 8 panels up on the roof, and I'll just tie it into the battery system in my garage, run my little garage on it. You know what I mean? And I'll see exactly how it works and how long each battery works, and it'd be a good proving out system type of thing. So I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah. I think that the idea of free energy to people is less complicated necessarily than they think, because it's all about efficiency is what it is. So even if you were still consuming power, but you were consuming power at a high degree of efficiency, because you purified the energy, stored it, and then dispelled it and rationed it out yourself as to the needs of the system, right? If you were just to do an efficiency run on it, so to speak, you'd be running at such a higher degree of efficiency that your bill would immediately go 80 to 90% down just because of the efficiency increases.
Yeah, hold on, Rick. I just want to give a shout out to Papa Bale. I love his show, man.
I check him out every so often too. Awesome work. I caught him playing some video games the other day, I think too.
He goes, "It's something I said," and I wanted to say hi. So and then Mike's going to join us here in a little bit.
Very cool.
So one of the other thing, real quick, I know we're talking about solar, but I want to switch subjects for 1 second because Jarvis said that scalar is, what do you call it? Scalar static electricity, and I disagree with that.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
And here's why. Static electricity, you can load up your entire tabletop with static electricity, but this energy doesn't work that way. It's the opposite side. So you're getting what Steinmetz called the magnetic field impure. So that's what it's doing, and it's acting like that. So if I went over and put this energy into my burrito, I should walk over and get shocked by my burrito. Every time. Just zap me. But it doesn't. It produces heat in the way of frequency, like a high RF, but it does not shock you like that. So there are 2 different types of energy there, and I think we're looking at the wrong one. Don't get me wrong. I use a lot of static for a lot of things, but I found out that it's not the same energy at all. It has none of the same characteristics. Not even when you drop all the amps out of it, does not have it. They're totally they're opposite.
Static, to me, if I had to kind of describe static, is you have a lot of accumulation of free electrons that are there but have no direction of propagation. They have no flow to them. And that's why it's static, is because there's no flow to it and there's no order to it, but they're still bundled up in a, like almost like a charge pack, and they're waiting for something conductive in order to flow. And once they flow, they're no longer static, which is why, like, if you touch something, if you have a static charge on you and you touch something, it sparks from point A, to point
Absolutely.
B. And once it sparks, now it's no longer static. Now it's actually pure, electrical energy that, depending on what it's going into and how powerful it is and so on and so forth, would be its manifestation beyond that. But that's the difference. It's almost fluid in nature, as far as it's almost a medium, so to speak, to a degree. It's like a pool, or a puddle, I should say. It's like a puddle of energy.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing for people is when we strip back the energy. Yeah, that's really difficult for people to get their minds around. It's like, if I told you there's no voltage, just amperage, have you seen it? If I told you that it's all amperage and no volts, have you seen it? If I said the opposite, if it's all volts and no amps, have you seen it? Nobody really has. That's the problem. Like, I'll even say, when I have something in a pure static, right, where it's 0.000012 of an amp, that's still all those zeros plus the 1-2 of an amp. And I can't eliminate it completely. You know what I mean? There's nothing I could do to eliminate it completely. And it has to have one and the other in order to work. So what we're doing is we're just amplifying one of them. And that's really all we can do.
Okay, so I want to. Jarvis said something that kind of jarred my mind into scalar real quick, because this is something I never really thought of before, even though I've said it, but I've never thought about it this way. Scalar really can only be produced as not from its source of propagation, but rather its interferences which occur after its free waveform. So when you have a free waveform at that point, okay, it's the interactions that occur once that free waveform is out there with other waveforms that create the scalar. It has to have a root. It has to have a root frequency and a source that is something else. But once it has this free wave interference, it becomes scalar, and it does have propagation. So it can become multi-directional, okay, but at the same time, it could also, like other things, it could also be directed. Now, like anything else that's directed, it would be multi-directional because it would be diffuse outward, but it would be diffuse outward in a direction of propagation from its source interference. And the full return would really only occur after it returns to a waveform. Like, that's my opinion of it. I mean, and that's based a lot on the ideas of Bearden and his explanations of it.
I don't know if in scalar there is a waveform.
It's not a waveform like
more
that.
Of a set of energy based on the amount of energy at each
Well,
stage.
maybe not a waveform, but a waveform. It's still got a point of propagation. So if it's a plane and the plane's out,
Yeah, it has different levels in it.
Right.
So if it was an orange, it would be like,
and then they interact to become scalar, right? It becomes the scalar, and then it has directional propagation, and it would be dimensionally 360 degrees, but it would be diffuse off of the main line of propagation. Diffuse off the main line of propagation. So, you'd have an area of directional propagation that would be most potent, so to speak, and then diffuse and gradient outward like everything else, which is just a second form of propagation, longitudinal propagation.
Well, yeah, but because it's based on frequency as well, it'd pick up somewhere else as soon as you had something that matched the frequency again. They can amplify it one more time.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the use of it. that's the use.
That's why you would do it,
right?
Yeah.
But that's in the return to its native state. That's the trick to the use of it, is the return to the native state through the native frequencies, through further interference of multi-source scalar propagation.
Yeah, well, it's like I showed, it's flipping it back. So you go from, hot energy to cold energy to hot energy, and it all falls in line. You can describe it how you want, but that's what it does.
Now, mind you, something too, that those are somewhat toroidal in nature too. So, like Jarvis is kind of suggesting, you have this outward flow, right? Like outward in all directions, longitudinally, one side. But it's also got to pull in from somewhere. And this is what we had discussed all along about the center of the torus. The center of the torus, a vacuum and a pump. That's what you got. Got one side in, one side out, and compression in the middle with a 0 point vector. Where there's equilibrium.
Here's
your
the
dead
thing.
zone.
As soon as you change your geometry, it changes the way it looks.
Yeah,
that's the problem with this stuff. And you don't recognize it right away. Like, you'll think of it as a whole different thing just when you change the geometry. And Sean did this with his Tesla coil when he made that cannonball, the Death Star. You know what I mean? Completely changed the geometry, but completely changed the fields in it. So now he's got a north and a south, but he's got a null zone in the center.
So here's something to think about the reconstitution of dual scalar propagation, is that on the return of the point of interference, which we would call like the vector plane, or the event horizon, right? Once that event horizon occurs and it's like the rubber band snapping, right? It would do so in a longitudinal teardrop, right? So you'd have vacuuming in, pushing out, return to sender. It would expand and then shoot back from where it came, right? And once it gets back to where it came, it would reach another crossing vector point, creating like a teardrop. And it's right at that teardrop that you get your secondary effect at a distance instantaneously.
Nice.
Boom.
Mike, what's up?
It's Chef Faraday today.
Chef Faraday, what are you doing?
Yeah,
I am
cool.
doing pork back ribs. I'm doing rice. Yeah.
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
How come I can't live closer to you right now? I don't want to go in the cold, but that food sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm cooking up a storm here for dinner. Just me and my daughter. My wife's overseas right now, so it's just me and her.
I love it, bro. There's no better way to spend a weekend than making ribs. I'm a massive proponent of that. So, what are you doing? Are you doing on the smoker? Are you doing them in the oven? What you up to?
Well, what I do is I boil it first, and then I have a seasoning regimen that I put on it, and then I let it sit for a while, and then after that, then I put it in the air fryer. Just
Texas
to make it
crust,
crispy.
brother. No shame in that. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that and some rice, and keep it
nice,
simple.
man.
Nice. I like doing the offset smoker, and then wrapping it with the sauce and a little bit of sweet butter in there. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I love smokers. I love them. But, to get a really good cook, it takes 10 to 12 hours, right? If you're doing a brisket, or
not for ribs,
shoulder. No, ribs are pretty quick. Fish is pretty quick. But if you want to do, say, like a pork shoulder or
12 hours.
Brisket, a pulled pork, to get a decent smoke on it, you're looking at 10 to 12 hours. And
the worst of them all is I make my own ham cure it and the whole nine. But then I put it on the smoker. A
Yeah.
whole entire ham is a 16-hour endeavor.
Oh, no doubt.
Minimum. Could be up to 20.
Because like they say the best temperature to smoke your meat at is about 260, no higher, 260 to 270. And just sit around, have 10 beers, and it'll you have to make the time go quicker.
Yeah, well, we don't have enough episode left for today to tell you about all my barbecue ventures, but one thing I'll tell you is one of the best times I ever had on a smoker was I was a lot younger. I don't think I even had kids yet, but me and my buddy planned to smoke a turkey like weeks in advance. We're like, all right, a couple weeks from now we're gonna do a turkey. I'm gonna start it, come by, we'll hang out. So because we planned it so far in advance, we didn't realize we were getting a bad snowstorm, like a real deal bad snowstorm. I think there was like 2 feet of snow or something like that.
That's terrible.
And it snowed. He's like, so are we taking a rain check? I was like, dude, I've been out there since I've been out there since 5 a.m. getting it all ready. I was like, you coming by? He came by. It was impossible to keep the temperature of that smoker up. It's beautiful.
Oh.
Yeah,
it was impossible to keep the temperature of that smoker up because it was so cold out, and we polished off an entire bottle of bourbon between the two of us. Waiting for that turkey to be done. Yeah, we were.
This is
we were shit-faced by the time it was time for bird, bro.
Yeah. Well, we got this snow last night, so that's my what I woke up to.
Nice.
Yeah, we got dusted here last night too.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So switch camera back. Doing this all on a cell phone, and there we go. Now you can see my ugly mug again. So
there he is.
Yeah, I found an interesting video that Laser Saber did last night. When Ed Lee Scallon, he made that horseshoe type iron bar, and he's got the 2 coils on either end, and you get a magnetic lock when you put the other end on it, touch it with some current for a quick second, and it locks. Well, Laser Saber found at the crest, at the top where the curve is, on the inside of the curve and on the outside of the curve, when he put his current meter there, he was getting a reading.
Hendershot. Hendershot generator.
Yeah. So the question is, well, if it's in a magnetic lock and it's static, it shouldn't be moving. But obviously that's not correct. It's showing that there's a current where the blotch wall is. So what I think is happening, because it can't go any further beyond the blotch wall, I think what it's doing, it's actually creating a cavitation. It's rotating where the blotch wall is. That's why when he puts his meter on there, he's actually picking up a current, where the field there you would think would be static. It's not. It's actually in motion. So I'm going to investigate this more. Maybe later I'll send you the link, Nathan, of the video that Laser Saber. And this was done 14 years ago. This is an old video. But I never heard anything from him about that finding ever since he did that. So I'm curious to see if there was...
Well, yeah, I want to see that video too. That's very cool.
Yeah, it was a very small current, but it did show that there was a kinetic movement there. There was obviously either an oscillation or a spin of some kind, but it was always in the same spot on the inside of the curve where the iron bar curves. On the inside, that is positive, and on the outside, it's negative. Really weird. I've never seen that before. I didn't even know that was even possible to have a current inside a locked magnet that's basically you would think would be static.
Kind of reminds me of how like magnetic suspension works, like a Cadillac. A little bit, like how it repels each other, and so therefore it could be like compressed and then shocked back. but then there's like, even when it's at rest, like there's got, like if it was no load on it, there's got to be some kind of interaction between the magnets in, in force there because of the magnetic field repulsion and compression.
Yeah, because it kind of leads to me to ask, if there is motion there, what's causing the motion? That could be the 0 point fluctuation actually influencing the current at the blotch wall. There's no other explanation because there's no other
there could be like a Casimir effect too.
Maybe, yeah.
Where the two magnetic planes meet, there's like in between those the fields, if they're strong enough and they're not gradient into one another because they're repelling each other or whatever.
Right.
Hey, Gerald's here.
Oh my God,
What's up, buddy?
The man, the myth, the legend.
I haven't seen you in weeks, brother.
Boom, Mike.
Just like that.
So
Just like that.
I think there's some credence to my claim that could be 0 point fluctuations influencing that magnetic field at the blotch wall. Because if it wasn't there, there shouldn't be no current.
Right.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any current in theory. The only thing that I could think of that would influence that is 0 point fluctuation. So
yeah, I'm dying to see it. I'm gonna have to take a good solid look at it.
You know what? It's a kind of an outlandish claim, but maybe there is something to that. So I don't know.
Very cool.
He's working. See, I told you he's working like a dog.
Yeah. Oh, I figured he was. So
I hear you. My first week back to work sucked. All my machines broke. I was like a maintenance man all week on the friggin' machines.
Well, he says you're correct in part in the principle around my coils. Nice.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Well, what I was trying to show you guys was they're using that same principle in this. So watch, I'll show it to you guys. In that Henderson generator.
The video is like this big on my screen, so I'm gonna see the best I can.
I'll just show you the picture.
Oh, okay.
You can see the horseshoe shape right there. You can see the part that goes below it. They're tapping it, right? But if I'm not mistaken, the one that you're talking about, he had them wrapped in coils around the bottom of the horseshoe.
Yeah, on either side, he had a two big coils. And when you put power to it, it creates the magnetic lock, right? As soon as it's in magnetic lock, that's when you can start taking your readings at the crest of the curve. So on the inside is positive, and on the outside of the curve, it's negative.
So Joe says the blotch wall is the point source for the ether pump.
Yeah, which makes total sense. Because if it didn't exist, there should not be any current whatsoever happening at that point of the horseshoe.
Yeah. I mean, these fields, even though it's not a physical barrier, so to speak, I mean, there's definitely like a membrane, and those membranes interactions when they're not gradient into one another, that's, to me, the mechanism of pretty much that is because that's the point of the pressure, the pressure differential of the greatest on either side. That's a point of, like no pressure because it's so close. And what's fascinating about like the size of that that particular gap is that gap is probably less than Planck's distance. See how like
it's in a very confined space. That's why if there is current now, is the current in a linear motion or is it rotating? That's another question.
Well, it may be longitudinal only because that's all that could get through at that sort of distance. So it would be scalar.
So all he has is coils wrapped around each side, right? And then he pulls the top.
Yeah, 2 coils. They're interconnected in series, and then all he does is energize it with a 9-volt battery, and puts the other piece of the horseshoe on the other side, and then it's in lock. And then you can actually physically take the battery away from the connection. As soon as you disconnect the two coils from each other, the lock is broken. So
Okay. So we'll have to do that. It should be a pretty easy experiment, right?
yeah, and this was what Edley Scallon was working on. You can look up his stuff, and it'll actually show you what he actually did.
Yeah,
So
Jarvis did that.
Yeah.
Oh, that has to do with the Coral Castle, right?
Yep.
Sorry, it just snapped in my head.
Well, I mean, just by virtue of the rotation of the fields in that void area would be mechanism for, spiraling rotation, just because of the counteracting fields, and anything that passes through it, it would be like running it through okay,
So
like an auger. You know how like an auger like moves pellet fuel or something like that?
right.
Like the pellet fuel kind of would be like etheric energy in that circumstance, and it would move, down the line. That makes total sense because of what the outside of it's doing. That's actually what I believe the mechanism of everything to be, by the way, like the full-on mechanism of everything.
Well, I think
this pressure disturbance and then this gap in between, and what the pressure does to one side, the other, and the in between is what my theory is the mechanism of all existence. So
it's the fluctuation of.
Sorry.
Hey, Philip. It's the fluctuation of multiple waves of energy that are influencing each other. They're bumping into each other all the time, and you're getting counter reactions, which creates a constant movement in the ether, right?
Yeah.
With all these fluctuations in the ether is not static. It is very kinetic. It's in motion all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with you more there. The scales that we're used to, observing these ether differentials and these gaps, like on the global scale of things, though, really is more manifest in terms of weather patterns and flows and things of that nature that you'd be able to see.
It doesn't matter what scale if you're talking at the quantum level or you're talking at the scale in our reality, it's no different. All the same forces that take place in the same aspect, using the same physics. It's just scale, right?
It is, yeah.
There's an entirely different world at the quantum level that we will never see because we're not capable of seeing it. We're in a scale way larger than that. So, its scale is kind of relative. Doesn't matter what scale you're at, it still interacts. The same physics apply at the quantum level as they do at our level of our reality. It's no different. It's scaling. It's all about scale.
Yeah.
So,
I know there's a lot of people out there that like the idea of quantum physics and some of like their findings and stuff like kind of turn them off because of really how far they've taken it. But when you start to look down that far, and then you start to see things like electron shells or just atoms and things of that nature, we were saying before that like string theory basically is all but gone out the window entirely at this point. Even mainstream is like, it's probably not this, and I couldn't agree more. When you have these individual spinning particles, we visualize them as something round or whatever, but realistically it's just in my opinion at least, again, don't take what I'm saying, but it's disconnected spinning waveform. So you have a portion of a waveform spinning so fast in onto itself that what's to differentiate it from a circle? Then you have that damn thing moving so fast around another central axis so rapidly that it's basically everywhere along the spherical surface simultaneously 1,000 times per second. So if you were to touch it or whatever, what differentiates that from a shell? If it's everywhere, you're touching 1,000 times per second.
Yeah.
I'm just making these numbers up, but you did broadcast the idea. But
Yeah.
that's sort of the difference. What's a shell other than if you have a point that's just everywhere all the time?
Yeah. Yeah, well, all the same physics apply in the scale of our universe, which is much larger than us. It's just in, greater distances, but still the same physics are applying to that scale as it is to our scale. It's all always working the same way. It's all interacting the same. We just don't see it. We're not capable of seeing it.
Definitely.
Yeah, you imagine if we actually got to see every field out there? It'd be absolutely amazing, wouldn't it?
It would be very confusing.
Well, it might be, but then you can make it out. It's kind of like one of those little puzzles you look at, and it looks like just a bunch of blurry stuff. And you look at it long enough, it says words in there.
Yeah. Eventually, someday, somebody's going to come up with some crazy contraption that's going to show these fluctuations in magnetic fields interacting with other magnetic fields. It'll just show you how active our universe actually is. When we think of empty space, we with our eyes, we see nothing, but there's a tremendous amount of activity happening there that we're just not capable of seeing. It doesn't mean it's there, not there,
Yep.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's hard to figure something out when you can't see it. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's one thing to pick up a remote and say, okay, well, I know this is plastic and there's some circuitry inside, and you could back engineer it. You can't do that with a waveform and a fluctuation, something you can't see tangible in your hand, right? So,
what makes me laugh is they say that there's a big bang, right? And then I'm sitting there saying to myself, is like, oh, so we passed through the center of the torus and we're on the inside going out, and that's why there's ever expansion as we come closer to the surface of the
we're
outside.
on the inside of the
And
hole.
that's why you have a point that you can't see past, is because it's not on the inside anymore, it's on the outside. And that's why you can't see back past the Big Bang, is because it was the point of greatest compression before everything started to expand. Don't we understand? Like how come I've never heard someone in normal science say this? Like, when you look around you, it's everywhere you look. It's present. It's omnipresent. It's like the mechanism of everything. And then you do all these scientific studies and mappings and measurements and distances and all this, and it shows exactly this. And everyone's like, so we must have exploded out of this one point. It's like, okay, yeah, but do you see the rest?
Yeah.
Do you understand why everything goes into a state of lowest entropy or whatever, highest entropy, at the edge, and then all of a sudden it's like no more? It's because it's on the outside now, man, and you can't look at the outside.
Yeah.
Because you're inside. That's how that works.
The problem is we weren't at that point when supposedly this Big Bang happened, right? Our point of singularity when everything just got created. We weren't there to witness this, but because of so many billions of years have passed since that event, it will become harder and harder and harder to figure out exactly what happened at the beginning, if there was even a beginning to begin.
So,
right?
Which is the point. So Big Bang's not the beginning. It's just you passing through the recycling point of existence.
Right.
Is all it is.
Yeah, we just went through the hole.
Through the recycling point.
Oh, now we'll get in the space station over there, Mike. We were talking about that one night. We get the 7-Eleven of the universe, and we go drink our beers, watching the Big Bang happen.
Did you hear that?
Don't you think it's weird that they could look back to the Big Bang and still see the Big Bang because it's still banging?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, nobody ever thought that one through. They're like, it's billions of years old, and it's billions of years away, and it only happened once. or it's just happening continuously. Like, has anybody ever
Yeah,
realized
it's
that in order to
nonstop.
see a fraction of a second in time, you would have to be able to observe that fraction of a second of time, but yet you keep on observing the fraction of a second of time that you've said that you've observed. So that means that it's not a fraction of a second of time, it's just continuing.
And that's
Like,
where I think that's where theoretical physics kind of goes off the rail on that, because it's just like you weren't there. You weren't there to witness it. So you could come up with all the theories you want, unless there is actually 100% tangible evidence to prove it. You're just coming up with ideas in your head, and a lot of physicists like to do that, right?
Yeah.
It's all theoretical.
like I mean, and that's sort of it. But I mean, when the observations at all scales around you are one thing, and then you have an observation at the highest possible scale that we believe exists at the
Right.
like knowingly exists at this time, and you see the same exact consistencies throughout, and you fail to make the connection, you have to ask yourself who in the world is in charge here.
Exactly. And
That's
that's
like,
where the question of God comes into play, right? And that's where theoretical physics, that's a no man's land. They don't want to even cross that line.
yeah,
Right?
I would
They're
have to
afraid
say.
They're afraid to, because
Oh, yeah.
you know what? Sometimes the truth scares you more. The truth is scary sometimes. And
But
it
what
might-
does that say for time too, right? So the further that you get away from that center, right? Technically
Mhm.
speaking, what the faster or the slower time would
Well,
travel,
you know what? The
realistically.
way I look at time is a little bit different than most people. I relate time to any being that is conscious. Any being that's conscious will have the conception of time. So, like a rock, okay? The rock doesn't know what time is. It's
Mhm.
just there, right? The only reason why we know the concept of time is because we are a conscious being. We're
Right.
in constant motion. We're aware of our surroundings. We know events happening one after another, which is a human construct of time. To a rock or a planet, time doesn't really exist to it because it is non-conscious in the sense of like our intelligence.
Well, understood. I mean, I'm speaking on the like lines of our measurable, because it is measurable. And when you even talk about anything like frequency, right? Frequency can't exist but for time, because if there's no passage of anything, then there's no repetition for something to be frequent. It's just static at that point. So if it's not static and it has flow and propagation and movement,
Right.
then it has to be subject somewhat to time, unless if it's
Mhm.
above time and therefore not subject to the locality specifics of time space as we kind of contemplate it.
Yeah.
I mean, I would actually go as far as saying that once you pass through the center of the torus, like if that's actually what's going on, right? You get through the outside, now you're on the out, right?
Right.
You're actually not in time anymore.
Mm.
So it's only the compression and expansion that
Right.
that is the mechanism of time. It is the outer sphere of it that causes that time.
Yeah.
You're the
But
watcher.
if you're on the outer sphere of it, then time is not a thing.
Right. So, like, say at the quantum level, there's particles coming into existence and particles going out of existence. So, is that a proof of time? A time of coming into existence and a time of leaving existence? Is that a
It could-
measurable unit of time?
It becomes measurable while it's in existence, and once it's out of existence, it's not
Time
even that it
stops.
doesn't exist anymore necessarily. It just is beyond the scope of our dimensionary,
Yeah. Which makes
Yeah.
total sense. Time is a totally a human construct.
Right. So when something blinks out of our time and existence and whatever, it didn't just last for that duration. It's only in our perspective that it lasted for that duration, and it's not in existence anymore. It's just simply not here anymore.
Yeah, it
And
changes.
it could return back to a state of equilibrium and neutrality, which exists in manifest somewhere other than our observable reality,
Yeah.
just at a higher dimensional plane.
Well, they just recently did an experiment at the University of Toronto, and they were able to get, I believe it was a photon, to go into negative time. They made
Yeah,
it
that's
back.
crazy.
So that kind of puts a whirlwind in the whole time travel type scenario. Is going back in time possible? Well, according to this experiment, they were able to do it, make a photon go backwards.
They put light backwards.
Would it be a weird concept to say that to go backwards is as simple as going forwards fast enough? Because if you exit the expansion zone of a torus, and then you ride it back to the beginning, but the same stuff is always being pulled through, right? Then technically you could end up back of where you came.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those mysteries.
Right. If you know better than me, I applaud you.
Honestly,
I don't know better than
boat.
myself.
You know, like I listened to a lecture at Oxford, and these guys are so pompous, thinking like they've figured out everything, and meanwhile, in my opinion, they still know nothing. We're not even in the game yet as far as theoretical physics. You know,
The whole purpose of this episode was what they actually know, and versus what they're actually telling us, and it seems like what they actually know far exceeds any lecture you're going to hear.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find out soon enough.
Oh, we are.
I think the elites, they want to keep their secrets secret. So it's up to us, as experimenters, as inventors and stuff. We'll eventually figure it out on our own. We don't need them, because we know they're greedy and they want to hoard all this technology that they've been hiding from us for 120 plus years, and probably beyond that. So we're rediscovering stuff that was lost a long time ago. Like, perfect example would be, how the pyramids worked. We kind of touched on that last night. And everything's to a point, I think, has been discovered in our society, our race, but that elite group have hidden it from us. A lot of it was lost, and now we're rediscovering stuff that was already known.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I think that the mantra of a lot of our discussions has always been not whether or not our ancestors had this technology, but just maybe how it looked different than what we expect technology and what we define technology as today, with the ultimate use of it being not all too dissimilar.
Yeah.
But today we're looking for our energies to power our LED TVs and drive our cars or whatever, light our houses.
And the funny part is our LED TVs only take 12 volts to run, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
12 volts DC, and you run your TV. And they're making us use off the grid. That's, they're charging us by the kilowatt hour, right? So
yeah, we were talking about that earlier about efficiency, and how all you really had to do is you could take energy right off the grid, clean it up, get it into proper resonance and amplification and everything like that, store it, and then use it, and your consumption would go down by probably like 80-90% right off the bat.
Yeah, it just goes to show that if the government can't control it, they don't like it. Okay, let's go back in history. What the government wasn't able to control and why they were doing their darnest to get rid of was radio. Even today, they want to get rid of radio because they can't control it. That's why, Tesla, when he designed it, it was free. And it also didn't even need a power source. That's the kicker. So,
well, in the United States, it's always been free. But you see, they tried to control it in Europe. I mean, they have TV and radio licenses, and if you didn't have a license to receive, then you were in violation, and they would fine you as a pirate for pirating
pirate radio
signal.
There's a movie out.
And then they had vans that you would drive around and be able to pick up whether or not you were receiving a TV signal. And they would know exactly how many televisions you had in the house. And if you didn't have a license for every single one of those individual televisions, then they hit you with a fine. And before it was TV, though, it was radio. And that's where the TV license came from, was the fact that there was a radio license, because they were trying to fully control the airwaves, not only the broadcast, but also the receiving. They knew that receiving the air, receiving the signal was just as dangerous as the broadcast.
Yep. And now you got the internet, and they want to try to control that, but that's not working out too good.
Right. They started throwing people in jail for all sorts of different stuff.
Yeah, it depends who the president is, doesn't it? Because, they really started screwing with people under Biden. That all the people in J6, man, that's a whole nonsense racket there. I can't wait until they let them all out and they start putting the real criminals, like the people who were in charge of that Capitol building and the security there. All those people need to go to jail. So
what came out after that entire incident was the most disgusting inside job to create mayhem, havoc with their wanted scapegoat that I've probably ever seen in my lifetime. And what they did to regular people over it was pretty damn appalling.
It's shameful.
I mean, it is absolutely shameful. And I really can't wait for them to get out either. At the same exact time, one thing, where I woke up to how fake that all was when I saw Nancy Pelosi in the basement of the Capitol building, like in lockdown with Chuck Schumer, and they're sitting there going, "What do you mean there's nobody to get them out? What do you mean? Don't we have this? And what do you mean?" And then I'm sitting there saying to myself, like, "Yo, they literally said it," because before that it was on the news, and I remember this. It was on the news that they were offering up, a security detail, National Guard, whatever have you, to be there to prevent anything, so on and so forth. And she was the one that rejected it.
Yeah. So hold on. When they started showing people walking through the Capitol, when those tapes came out and they were taking pictures like tourists, I mean, their whole narrative went to poo. I mean, it's just, if I were them, and I think the president should do this, let them file a class action lawsuit against the government. Make sure the AG settles it and pays every last one of them out to set the precedent that this is what you get, that they have the right. You know what I mean? Not to throw things around or bash things up or anything like that, but they have the right to be there. You know what I mean? Or they have the right to walk through if everybody's being let through by the police. I mean, for God's sakes, if the police is saying, "Come on in," I think I'd have the right, don't I? If they're saying, "Hey, you go in there," if they say, "Hey, if you go in there, you get arrested, but I'm not going to stop you," then I'd go, "Well, hey, maybe I'll walk the other way." You know what I mean? I don't think that happened. They just opened the gates and let people flood through and didn't say anything. So they should definitely pay them out, set the precedent, and be done with it. And don't ever let the Democrats do it again.
Well, not for anything, but if you have an uncontrollable mob that's willing to drag you out of it, and like this is a fringe part of this conversation. This is my belief, and to each his own. But if you have a massive mob of citizens that are willing to risk themselves, go in and pull you out of a building for what you're about to do, the right thing to do is sit down and listen to why they want to do that and address that concern, because that's not a normal behavior. There's things that happen on a daily basis that people generally aren't happy about that come out of government, you know, and yet these things don't happen on the daily basis, no matter how much people are upset about something. For that number of people to take action, okay, should really set a tone as to something needing to be addressed rather than what needs to be punished. Because I hate to say it, but removing tyranny in the United States of America, when you perceive it as a tyrannical act, is a constitutional right. So, it doesn't happen so often that when it does happen that one time, that it shouldn't be viewed as a protected right to do so, unfortunately. And you want to know something? It doesn't say sit there and slap the tyrants on the wrist. It says you have the right to carry a firearm to protect yourself from the tyrants, to prevent these sorts of tyrannical governments. AK, they could have went in there and shot them and went well within their constitutional right, given the mode of action, because we're not talking about 1, 2, or 100 people doing it. You're talking about 1,000. I mean,
I don't know if that's true.
Well, it's not true, but you could definitely definitely
try it
that way. And I'm not endorsing violence, by the way, and I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. I'm just saying that, you know, the Second Amendment says, you know, in order to protect yourself against tyranny, you have the right to keep and bear arms against the tyrants. You know, that's what the amendment says.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, not something I endorse. It was an inside job in the first place. They were guided and let in. There was very little violence that actually occurred, given the number of people and the state of activities that were going on.
It was,
and that's it.
It was a government.
It was absolutely a trap.
It was. They knew how many people were there at the rally. They knew how close the rally was. They knew the rally was going to come down to there. This is all right in front of them. And all they had to do was their job, and they failed to do it. So whoever's job it was to secure that building is at fault. That's it. There's no other fault to go around. I don't care how long it took the president to take a poo. I don't care how long it took to take a pee. And then he got on his thing and did it. And then he brought the receipts that he did it right away. So it's ignorance, and it's morons pushing the ignorant part that really pisses me off. But I'll be honest with you, they didn't deserve it. Grandma's going there taking a picture didn't deserve it. You got somebody who just walked onto the ground, didn't deserve it. Yet that moron that goes over there and tells everybody to go into the Capitol building didn't get shit. That piece of garbage needs to go to jail. That's the person that deserved to get it right there. Not everyone else, not, with the tourists taking a picture in there. Because when you show the video of that, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's just ridiculous, man. They stayed within the little boundaries. The police led that shaman dude all over the building. I mean, seriously? They let him all over the building, and then he got in that much trouble? It's like, seriously? They're opening the doors for this guy.
Yeah, I know. It's a disgusting act. Hey, we could move this back into the juicy part of this conversation, I suppose.
Yes, let's go back to it. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
A lot of frustration. I live in California with fire.
But it leads right here. It leads right here, because all this was a cover-up, too. They told you for 4 years that this entire thing was a literal insurrection started by people it wasn't started by, and instigated by people it wasn't instigated by. And it was the biggest smoke show
Oh,
that's happened recently, aside from COVID and all this other crap. Without going into that, case in point. All right, we have 2.0 coming in. The stated agenda is one I'm personally on board with. Okay. And it's not to say that I scream from the mountaintop how great it is. I think everything government's garbage. But what we got coming in is someone who's saying bureaucrats be no more, or to the most minimal extent possible. Okay. We need to vet to see which agencies even need to exist at all. We need to downsize the agencies that we're keeping. We need to be able to limit their power. We need to be able to have them report to the federal government in proper fashions with transparency. We need to put people in charge of these things that are going to dissect the problems and be able to get rid of it. We need to be able to cut the funding to most of this stuff. This is a gutting of the United States federal government bureaucratic monster. Okay. According to what the agenda looks like. Now, seeing as what we were talking about today, I think it would stand to reason that if you start gutting the bureaucracies that have been holding all this stuff to themselves in the first place, and you start seeing what's really inside, downsizing them and then limiting their power, and the information then becomes known, what does that really mean? Is that going to happen? And what does that really mean for our future? Because one thing that you said that rings true is that the powers that be, the deep state of unelected people, the elites that hold all this power, they ain't letting go.
yeah, I
right?
know.
And they ain't letting go. So is this going to loosen it enough that once you have the loose thread, it doesn't matter what they're hanging on to, because the loose thread's enough to unwind the ball? Or are we just looking at a fruitless effort that's going to amount to enough on paper savings and improvements that the general public would feel satisfied, but me and you as people that are passionate about the internal corruptions that we really have, is that really stand to be purged? Yet to be seen, but what do you think?
I think there's a couple different things. I know they can't do everything. You got to get rid of those IRS agents. We don't need them. Okay. And it's not that nobody wants to pay their taxes. They do. But if we can get a few more dollars in our pocket, we're going to do it. That's it. And if there's a dispute, handle it and be done with it. Okay. We all don't want any more people scrutinizing us any more than we do. We're the poor side of the world. You can't just say it's for the rich, because that's a total BS argument. Because as soon as you're done with that stack, they're going to give you another stack as a bureaucrat, and that's us. And I don't want you here. Got to get rid of them. Okay? That's number one. They said term limits. I want term limits. Got to have people gone. Their bad ideas have been there for too long. Got to have them gone. You know what I mean? You get your time, you get to say your piece, then you get out. Okay? And I think they need to stop looking at them as lawmakers and look at them as, you're there to protect the people.
Public servants.
That's right.
Exactly. Not lawmakers, public servants.
That's right. You're there to help us out, not to make laws to screw us over. And I'm getting tired of law on top of law on top of law. When you go and you do something, you can be arrested for anything because there's so many laws. It's like, there's just too much garbage. Okay. Clean it out. You know what I mean?
This wasn't what the founding fathers had in mind.
No, not at all. Matter of fact, they'd be upset. They'd raid their own capital.
And that's what I was saying. That's what I was saying. Like,
those are the guys that'd be there first.
They wrote a nasty letter to their ruler telling them to go fuck themselves. Okay. And exactly why they ought to do that twice and hard. Okay. And then fought a war over it. Okay, like that's it. Like for less, much less, so much less.
Oh yeah, so much less than what we deal with
And then
now.
they put the checks and balances in play that it didn't need to happen again. But where every inch you give through your little laws from the lawmakers, every little inch you give, every little inch you take, you know, you look at it after 250 years and you say there ain't much left. I mean, and you know, all things being created equal, when you compare the United States to other places throughout the country, we are still free comparatively. But at the same time, we've given a lot away.
Yeah,
And
it's
we've
not
done
like-
it under the guise of safety. It's always that safety, and because that's the only thing that people buy that government has a responsibility for, is your well-being. Let me tell you something. Every one of you have responsibility for your own well-being, and nobody else has responsibility for your own well-being. But over time, people have, because of their own insecurities and stuff, said, you know what? No, we need all these programs and guarantees and things to protect us and blah, blah, blah. And it's the government's job to do this. And we handed that over to them. And once you hand it over to them, it's screwed up. That's it.
They ruined everything.
It's bad.
Well, I think this is kind of a global problem, just not American. I think all of our rights and freedoms that we thought we had, they looked at them as temporary privileges, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's exactly what happening. I think 9/11 was a big turning point. You know, the Patriot Act came out in the US, and now they're allowed to spy on their own citizens. So when the government starts invading your own personal privacy, that should ring alarm bells big time. Like,
Oh yeah,
there should have been friggin' protests in the streets over that one.
the Patriot
it's
Act.
funny.
They gotta get rid of it.
Leading up to this episode, Nathan and I were talking, and that was the example of like some of the stuff we would talk about was the Patriot Act. I was like, you name some, it's the biggest psychological guise that they could have possibly done. They take a horrific event where everybody is in turmoil.
False flag.
You know,
Yeah.
they play it up like we're in some kind of imminent danger after the event's up, say that that's a call to action. And as a call to action, name something a patriot, because what was everybody feeling in America at that time? Patriotism. There was over a year or two or more, frankly, of pretty astounding solidarity in this country following 9/11.
Right. Exactly.
All based around patriotism, us fighting the bad guys, all this. And, it felt like the most American thing that you could do is accept something by its name at face value, the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
To the point where nobody even cared to really understand what it was until it came out like years later and it was kind of exposed.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the scary part. So that's why I say the rights and freedoms that we have, they're temporary privileges. They'll initiate these false flag attacks to initiate a new narrative of control. Right?
And I'm not beyond saying that I don't even know what's going on right outside my own door right now. You know, you look at that whole drone orb situation and all that, and I'm just sitting there saying, listen, fool me once, shame on me. You know, but like, come on, man. Like, this is the same exact story, just told a different way.
Yeah.
And it's, we had fun speculating about it and talking about it and what it I don't think any one of us ever said it was aliens, that's for sure.
Well, I'll tell you right now, just sorry to cut you off. I think it was last week or the week before, there was one of those drones sighted in front of the CN Tower maybe about a half mile up. So it was spotted here.
Oh, there's stuff going on. That's for sure. There's a show going on.
Yeah.
You know, but we talked about like these different phenomena and stuff earlier in this cast where we said like you know that they had deactivated nukes and stuff like that, and these are known accounts, and you know I think everybody pretty much knows about that. Can I throw something out there that's absurd?
Yeah, why not?
Have you ever considered that it's possible that all of the active nukes in the entire country and across the world have been deactivated, and that nobody wants to talk about it?
That would be a good thing, but
Well, yeah, but nobody's going to fess up and be like, "Yeah, we have no nukes." You get it?
no,
You know? And you could build a new one and shoot it off in short order.
Schrodinger's
If
cat.
it was just sitting in stockpile, who's to say that it wasn't, you know, killed back in the 80s? And you know, nobody has nukes, but everybody says they have nukes, but nobody has nukes. What if that's the case? Because we got slapped on the wrist and had it taken away from us. Now, if you want one, you got to build one fresh and get it off the ground right quick, and hope that it doesn't get intervened with.
That just sounds bad. We're building nuclear weapons, but they're going real fast. Yeah.
Yeah, right. All right, pump it out.
Yeah.
Who's to say that? Who's to say that our uranium stores that aren't used for like nuclear power and stuff haven't received the same accelerated half-life decomposition?
Yeah, you know what? They keep kicking the can down the road with Iran and those nukes, and they better put a hard stop to it this time. Don't just sanction them. Don't put it off till later. Nobody wants to go to war, but there has to be a hard stop, and Israel's pretty much taking that right.
I was going to say, I think Israel. I say we, but I don't want to be included in that we. Like Biden said, don't do anything to them, blah blah blah, and then Israel's response to that was to, you know, send a couple of missiles directly into their refinement plants. Yeah. Like 5 minutes later, they're like, yeah, okay, senile.
Yeah. You gotta love those guys, man. They just they're taking control of their country for once and saying, you guys have all gone mad. We're handling business. So I don't agree with all the people, by the way, on that strip getting killed in the process of them taking care of their business, by the way. I do not like that. I do understand that they can't have a two-state solution and it was never going to work. So, but I do not care for all the killing that's going on there.
No, it's got to end one day, but it probably never will.
Unfortunately, in that region, yes. So,
yep.
Not unless God speaks up and we're all underwater here, and then there's no more problem, I guess. Except for hidden nuclear weapons in the middle of nowhere when other civilizations come along. You imagine if that's a problem we have and we don't know we have it? Like, they're buried in the earth somewhere and we just don't understand because other civilizations built them and we didn't realize it. And we just run across one of these things one day, drilling in the ground. I mean, man, that'd be horrifying, wouldn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, I mean, we keep on finding stuff in human civilization that's older and older and older than we originally thought. And then we realize that a lot of the conclusions that we taught as fact for a whole century turned out that it was wrong in the first place, like with the pyramids, and the Egyptians built the pyramids and it was 5,000 years ago and they built the pyramids and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, oh, wait a second. Now we're saying that the pyramids could be like 35 or 40,000 years old. Like, and there's a possibility of that. Yeah. Okay. And then you say that the civilization popped up in this one place. And before that, it was all just nomadic and no farming and this and that. And then all of a sudden they unearth a place that they know, 20,000 years ago was a bustling city, a city that's no different than the ones from 5,000 years ago. Like we're in this constant state of like realizing that what we knew before was pretty much incorrect, and that's because we just used the most basic thought process to draw our conclusions. You know, or some, or I shouldn't say basic thought process. We've used assumptions of, you know, to draw our conclusions.
Yeah. Well, if you get that to that level of technology, I guess you think about it. If you're taking stone and you're making it do stuff that electronics do, why would you not be able to split an atom? I mean, think about it. If you had the ability to move that big of a stone, you had the ability to make the harmonics that it takes, how are you not capable of doing that?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, another fascinating thing of the past is just like the abundance and use of 24 karat gold. Have you noticed how they had a lot of it and they used it in its pure form? And this was used in its pure form at times where alloying was a totally normal thing. And yet, how often do you come across gold relics of the past that are alloyed gold? Like never. Which is super fascinating because you would think that them being a human being no less than we are and knowing alloying and everything like that, that they would do that. So where'd all the gold come from? Did you know where are all these gold mines that they had? Did they, or were they just sitting by the river panning out all the gold 24/7? Like, is that what they were doing? No, I don't think so. But it'd be interesting to understand how they had, you know, as much gold in circulation back then as we do now with huge mining operations. Did they have a better way to accumulate it, or were they you know, capable of alchemy? I mean,
That might be it. I think they might have been alchemists, to be honest with you.
yeah.
So
It's just an interesting food for thought, something that and did you notice too how alchemy and being and everything like that to be able to create material like things like gold, like actual elemental materials, how that really only popped up after antiquity? Is it because it was known to have been done and trying to be rediscovered, right?
yeah. Well, that's interesting, isn't it?
I would say so.
The times
Because
things pop up in the world. Go ahead.
well, and yeah, it's crazy to think because like whether you're talking about esoteric and occult alchemy or you're talking about the actual chemical art of alchemy, they didn't see a differentiation of them at the time, and that the majority of the earliest known writings all have alchemical process with it, like as a root of them, because you know it had to be occulted, especially during once you hit the Dark Ages. I have a hunch that the Vatican figured alchemy out, and they had to put the kibosh on it, or else you know society was going to accelerate, and they couldn't have that because of the control of the Vatican. They put the kibosh on it. You know, started burning people and stuff, and then all of a sudden, you know, all your books had to be written as parables.
Well, it goes back to that old theory of ancient civilizations that they very well could have been technologically far more advanced than us, and we're just rediscovering stuff over the eons. You know, alchemy is probably the earliest forms of engineering, I would think. Right?
Yeah. Well, it's like Michael just said, you know, alchemy is old school metaphysics. It's literally what I mean. It's new school metaphysics too. Alchemy that's the jam, whether it's in self or you know in physicality.
I think it's pretty well fact that there's been 6 major cataclysms that happened on this planet in our existence of humanity on the planet. So why would we think we were the only ones that got technologically advanced? I think we're kind of hypocritical to think, that we were the only ones that were able to get technologically advanced, right?
Sorry, I can't hear.
Yeah, it was a little low. I kind of got
Also-
what you were saying though.
Yeah, I think it was just they went in a different direction of technology where we went in the left. They went in a different direction. Harmonics, frequency, alchemy, all this stuff. And we never did that. We went an entirely different direction. Burning fuels, combustion engine. And oh, hold on. Sorry.
What was that?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, now we can hear you. It's like it took the wrapper
Now
off.
you can hear me. So, no, I had my headset, what do you call my earbuds, and I guess they were kicking out. I'm cooking ribs right now, so
Remind
yeah,
us
so-
of those ribs again.
No more righteous cause, brother.
but what I'm saying is these past civilizations, they went in a technological different path, right? They went in a different path. They were doing alchemy. They were working with frequency and vibration, the pyramids, all that kind of stuff. They went just in a completely different direction that we did, right? So we went into the combustion era, steam, and then, nuclear and all this stuff. We went into more destructive forms of energy and technology where the ancients didn't. They were more into etheric, frequency, vibration, alchemy, all that stuff. It's just shows the difference between that past civilization and ours. But
Well,
the
there's
problem-
a point of differentiation that could be made as to why that is true, and I agree with you overwhelmingly. I mean, because it seems sort of apparent that we went more of a mechanical route in
Right.
this realm of advancement. So we focused more on the mechanical use, and as a byproduct of the mechanical, also understood the production of electricity.
Mhm.
As opposed to and rather than, so our fundamentals of all the forces at work stem from electrical current,
Mhm.
which is the path of our current development, which was a direct relationship with the mechanical technologies that forefathered it in this latest discovery of these different forces, right? The thing is that we didn't understand the fundamental forces of electricity. The chicken came before the egg in this circumstance. Those simpler forms of energy in terms of sound, vibration, and oscillation, and frequency, I think they took it from a ground up there, where they realized that those things are the power, the manifest of electricity, and the electricity was a secondary thought and a byproduct of that. Whereas we found the electricity and then realized all the other phenomena that followed because of electricity.
Yeah, we have it backwards.
We got it backwards, right? We actually got the chicken before the egg.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
then
I would agree
it
with that.
becomes much harder when you're making something from the ground up and it progresses in a natural fashion. It becomes way more understood than just having a cooked dish put in front of you and then figuring out every step of what it was to make it, what you got.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where we took it from, was from almost a reverse engineering perspective.
Yeah,
and not
see,
understanding the fundamentals.
like if you go back to say like 1600s, 1500s, if you were talking about ether energy and manifestation and all that stuff, they would probably kill you and think you're a witch, right? It's true. But meanwhile, that's exactly what it was. The fundamental stuff, the direction that we should have went in, they thought it was sacrilegious and you're a witch and, you were convicted and then they would kill you. And so, they just wouldn't accept it at that point in our history, right?
How dare you be able to do something that I can't? you know, right? Isn't that it? Like, I can't do that. Witchcraft.
Yeah. Even like playing with ESP and remote viewing and stuff like that. If you did that back in the 1500s, you'd be hung up and boiled in oil. If
you did that back in the 1980s, you'd be kidnapped and then boiled in oil.
Exactly. Right. But it just shows the difference in the culture back, several generations compared to, say, 30,000 years ago. The mindset was totally different.
When you realize that there's thousands of other people that have had similar or same experiences, and that the science starts to back it up, all of a sudden it just starts to become less like, well, we better get a fire started and tie the guy up with a stick. It's just kind of how it goes, I guess.
So, Robert here asked, what do you guys think about Malcolm and his thunderstorm generator?
Well, it's working with plasma, right? Plasma is the fourth state of matter. So we should have been playing with plasma way, way back, which some guys were, but it went in the different direction. They went into the combustion. They went into using oil and non-renewable stuff. We should have been playing with plasma a long time ago. And that's why Tesla was able to do some of the stuff he was doing here, because he was playing with plasma.
I've said it a bunch of times. I mean, I love thunderstorm generator. In fact, if there's anybody out there that doesn't understand the flow of these forces, the interactions and everything like that, understanding the thunderstorm generator is the best, easiest way to kind of give yourself a little head start in that. It's all it is a semi-mechanical version of everything that everybody here is trying to do with coil systems. It just uses a different process of achieving it. I mean, I personally think that it was pretty brilliant to, ionize the gases coming into the chamber and then have a medium change to force cavitation under vacuum and compression. I mean, that's that's really nailing the fundamentals right there. And then once you have the cavitation pop, the explosion of energy, making coherent, charges, and then counter rotating the hot and the cold, in a vortex with an event horizon is a brilliant idea of, a mechanical way to exploit, plasmoids. It realistically is. And, when you're dealing with those high, highly charged plasmoids that like the energy density in them at like such a minimal point, and then their desire to kind of bundle up and form in coherence with each other is just, again, it's just an effective way to have a means meet your end, and I really, really appreciate not only that system, but also how he realized the bigger picture of it through plasmoid unification, which is obviously directly based on resonance and frequency and harmonics, works off of octaves. I mean, again, it's the thunderstorm generator and Malcolm's work really does represent a pretty good stab at a unified theory that is mechanical and easy to visualize. So I've always said kudos to him on that. There's obviously been people out there that expose the fact that, well, he's not the one that came up with this idea. None of us ever are, but guess what? He's alive, and
he's actively
alive,
working on
and
the
he's
tech,
able
yeah.
to spread the word. And the
Mhm.
credit is due to those that
I agree with that.
have popular adoption. That's the fact of the matter. The credit is due to the person who is able to achieve popular adoption.
Mhm.
So
Get it out there.
he's due all the credit that he receives on it. And I really haven't heard too many people be able to naysay his technology, and his testing is pretty solid compared to, he's very transparent about it.
Yeah.
So again, it's all credit where credit's due. I think it's great work.
Yeah, like I was dabbling with that stuff back in 2005. I was making the HHO Brown's gas generators for my car, and they do work. But, I was playing with a device that I didn't understand, right? What was actually going on inside. And, down the road, you get more educated on the subject of actually what is going on there. It's not just making hydrogen gas. It's also creating plasmoids, which, again, we go back to that same scenario that, there's things going on that we can't see,
Mhm.
right? And, there's some great people out there. Moray King's one of them, and Kenneth Shoulders, Hutchison. All these guys were working with this stuff years before I was. So now the technology is becoming more mature. People are more educated on it, actually know what's actually happening at the nanoscale with this reaction. And now that we're understanding these plasmoids and how the plasma and the energy density of these particles being generated, now it's time for us to put it into a practical sense. And that's where, Malcolm Bendall has been successful in building, maybe the first generation of these new type of power sources that we're going to use. So, yeah, I agree. Kudos to him that, maybe we could get this in a wide scale usage now. So,
Yeah. So also worth mentioning on the subject too is, all of his tests, without trying to run a comparison to coil systems on his part, but I will, all of his tests that he shows with the thermos on it are directly analogous to what Nathan described earlier, how there's massive temperature differentials that are non-gradient. Okay, you could sit there and aim a thermo at one of the balls and stuff, and there's going to be one side piping hot and another spot that's absolutely chilling cold comparatively.
Right.
Hundreds of degrees cooler, all in the same exact sphere. So that's exactly the reaction that you're looking for to create the plasmoids, amplify the plasmoids. That's the temperature differential that takes what's existing and pumps it up and charges it. Once it reaches that state of equilibrium in the middle and it reacts, now it's chewing. That's why those spheres have all those cavitation holes in them and stuff like that, because the plasmoids are effective in terms of dematerializing the inner surfaces of the, and that's directly related to scale R2 and stuff, because that's the process of dematerialization for energy creation. You got to be able to connect the dots and see these things. And really where I give the guy credit is the fact that he looked at and learned from the people that failed before him and why. That's what sets him apart. See, like he knew he couldn't come out because someone said it earlier. They said, well, the good stuff is not public, right? And I agree. Yeah. The reason it used to be He used to say exactly how he had it hooked up. He used to say exactly what it used to do. He used to tell you that the thing only sips fumes of gas, and that you would, it needs gas to run, but not very much, like at all. He used to tell you that the exhaust was recycled directly into the carburetor, and that, it was a closed loop system with two valves that you'd have to flip simultaneously in order to close the loop from during the warm-up phase to get to 700 degrees or whatever it had to get to, 800 degrees. All right. He used to tell you all of that, but once he submitted for the patents, all that stuff disappeared.
Yeah.
It's gone. All those tests, all that setup, it's gone. And that's not the patent he submitted. The patent he submitted made no claims of energy efficiency at all.
Yeah.
It all it said is that it cleans your exhaust.
Yeah.
And he likened it to a highly efficient catalytic converter. And that's one of the things that he knew was not actually suppressed, was trying to get low emissions. So that's that. Low emissions through a hydrocarbon combustion engine. They don't want, obviously, hydrogen cell technology, because that's on the blacklist. So you can't do that, right? So how do you loophole it? Well, it burns gas, and all it does is blow out clean exhaust.
Yep.
Give me my patent,
They're
buddy.
done. Yeah.
Right. Next thing you know, you're not on a hit list. They approve your patent because it's good. He gets all the testing done, and it's blowing air out its rear end. Cool. You can run a generator inside of a closed building. He's done it. So it's good stuff.
Yeah. There's some people that were able to get through the patent office and get their devices patented. The other one was the EV gray motor. He was actually able to get it patented, and but still, it ended bad for him down the road because they seen what the actual engine could do, and that's when all the threats started, and drove him crazy.
I always said, if you want, there's so many people out there in this community that say, I want to be a part of spreading this and getting it out. And then some people do talk about patents that they want to do. Other people talk about just being able to get the technology out there somehow, even on a small scale, to people, right? Yeah. Here's the number one thing you do to not get shut down. Don't make claims. That's all you have to do. It's the same as a supplement, right? Yeah. You don't say how much over unity power the thing is producing or whatever have you. You don't say any of that. You just say that, you give a technical definition of what it's doing in terms of efficiency. And then you say that, that the whole point of it is to bring your home electrical system and your appliance in sync.
Yeah.
That's what you say. Let the people that are purchasing it know what it does.
Yeah.
Exactly. Your marketing has nothing to do with your patent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just saying, noodles.
Tell them only what they need to know about the device.
Exactly. Right. You're just bringing you're bringing your home electricity and your appliance into resonance. Thank you. That's it.
Yep. Anyways, guys, I got a jet here. Thanks, Nathan, for having me on.
Yeah, no problem, Mike. Thank you for coming on.
All right, Mike. Catch you later, buddy.
Okay, take care, guys.
Oh, well, yeah. Thunderstorm generator, man. That's just cool. I just love it when people are able to make stuff work.
Yeah, it really is. It's weird because before I knew anything about the thunderstorm generator, when I had first heard of it, I thought it was actually an atmospheric device. And then I was like, I had to watch a good amount of content in order to even understand what it was trying to accomplish, because they were not all that, forthcoming about what it was doing. Yeah.
I had to watch several videos myself to figure that out.
But once I got it, I was like, oh yeah, they're not playing with fire. They're playing with something cooler than that.
Yeah, no kidding, huh? So I'll say this when Ashton talks about that airplane. The only way for that thing to work is the device that creates the plasmoids has to be in the plane. I don't know that unless there's another one right in front of it that puts off that field, that they can get that to work like that.
I have a couple of opinions of how that could work without there being a device on the plane.
Really? Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple. One is ionization of the airplane. So
they create a field around the airplane itself?
You basically you draw the ions out of the airplane and it becomes deionized in equilibrium. And then your plasma balls would probably have the ionization in their own fields. And then when they converge to a single point of extreme density, that creates your phenomena. I think that's one way. Another way is similar, except it's more consistent, but reverse of like what Philip talks about with the ionization, where you actually have a source of propagation locked on to what it is, and that acts as an ionizing force on it, and it just tracks it, and then your other your orbs are doing their thing around that ionized field. But it all has to do with polarity, in my opinion anyway. And there does have to be, I think, some type of external, either internal within the orbs or external being tracking it, but remotely.
Yeah, but there was nothing around that thing every time you see the video. You know what I mean?
Yeah, which was why it could either be the orbs or nothing around it, meaning what? Not something can't be sending a signal at it. That's
nothing seen in the video. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
whether there was something outside this view.
I mean, that you can put an emission out, a directed emission out that would cause ionization of the plane. It would become statically charged. And so
I can see the static charge. It looked like they pulled the ball, or the ball light, whatever you want to call it, plasmoid. They pulled it and then it went around the plane, but they got sync with the other ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it was created in a different area and then pulled towards it is what it looked like.
There was definitely some kind of attraction thing going on there. I mean, another thing that planes just experience naturally, is like St. Elmo's fire, which is ionization around the plane just by virtue of its atmospheric conditions. So that the airplane is subject to being ionized. It's aluminum, for Christ's sakes. You could get a field around that thing like nobody's business.
Well, yeah.
Or you could leach the ions off of it like nobody's business too, because of its, principal behaviors of aluminum.
It's just interesting.
Not storing that charge.
Yeah, I would always think that the device would be on it, or it was the plane itself that was the point. You know what I mean? Where everything culminated, which we know that the field did in the end. It just there had to be something that triggered anything that had to come from the plane.
Well, in order for the plane to zap out, I believe also, this is me talking off the cuff, just based on my own kind of things I've said in the past, right? So in order for the plane just to zap out like that, if that's what happened, right? And not dematerialize, which it did not. Okay. I would say that there has to be coherent resonant frequency between the airplane and the mechanism of the, first of all, people say that was an explosive event. That was an implosive event. Okay. And it's that event, if that's how it happened, it looks like cavitation to me, atmospheric cavitation. So And the reason I say it's an implosive event is because there's a convergence, okay, of the orbs, right? It's that convergence that actually blinked and tore the hole, okay? But realistically, the pop out that you saw as a result of that convergence, okay, was after the plane was kind of like gone. So that was when it closed, it just has a ripple effect, an explosion out, because it's an equal opposite reaction, right? So you have a cavitation event where it's implosive. It literally sucks it to a certain point. Boop, plane's gone. Then all of a sudden expansion, and that's the expansion that you see. That's kind of the best I could reason with it.
Okay.
So it's an implosive event, I believe, on the convergence, based on and the science behind that is consistent with what I've kind of speculated before on other things, which is once the convergence happens, it's such a high energy density in that particular area that it would cause, what you saw.
So
A
if
tear.
you say you had a plane ahead of it, right? And it was trying to take you down with frequency, right? Disruptive frequency caused you to get into turbulence, right? And what if it just went wrong? It created the ionization instead of the turbulence because the frequency they used was wrong. Would that be something that could have happened there?
That could be too. Now you got to remember, there's different footage of that from several different angles and from several different sources, but all from the same resource of the event. And I believe that one of the videos that were taken was from like a drone, like not like one of the drones, like one of our drones. So I think that if you have optical sense on, capturing a video of this event from a drone, right? I also then say that chances are that could be your source of propagation of whatever atomizing force might be there too. See, like that drone could easily have been the one sending these signals out. The drone could have been the actual source of the event.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So it's capturing it on video, but it's also the one doing it. I've never heard Ashton say that, but like if it's on video, then who's to say that it doesn't have the arrays capable of actually producing this?
Yeah. I mean, I guess there was something weird going on in that for sure. I'll say that.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of hard when you have those
video that I really
comparables.
like, that they're really credible. There's things I like about it,
Yeah. We'll have to create some plasmoids to go up in the air so that we can see what's going on. You know what I mean? In order to compare it. I mean, that's kind of the only way that you could say, hey, yeah, you know what I mean? Because I mean, I don't know what else to make of it. You kind of just have plasmoids there, and they're in perfect rotation. So, I mean, what do you say about that? They're rotating something for a reason. They're coming to a singularity point. That's obvious. So, but
right. So opposites attract. So if you ionize an airplane, with positive ions, let's just say, and then you create a negative plasmatic, plasmoid orb, it's obviously going to be attracted to it. But there's some mechanism similar to what Mike was saying before with this field locking, and then the space in between the field locking, and that's why everything's equally spaced. It's the natural motion of this as an orbit. I mean, that's another thing that's interesting about thunderstorm generator too, is that when the systems are overcharged, the ball lightning actually escapes the system and will dance on the outside or go about. Like it's unlike creating ball lightning in some of the ways that I've seen on the channel, where you're creating it as a plasma contained inside of like a gas bulb or whatever have you. Same thing, except I haven't seen anybody say that they've had one escape on them yet. So it has to do with the overcharging of the system, because that's when thunderstorm generator throws ball lightning out of its system, is when it's overcharged. So if you were to overcharge that, there's a potential for it to always escape and become free. It needs to be out of the glass and contained some other way through high energy density that would keep it together outside of the tube to keep the gas from expanding. See, that's sort of the deal. When that's what the overcharge is about. It's about keeping the plasma contained.
Yeah, I think it might be electrostatic, to be very honest with you. You know what I mean? Up there in the atmosphere or something like that, they have the stuff that runs a coronal motor. So that's a high static field. And in order to swirl that, you just need some form of tornado, or not tornado, but you know what I mean, that form. So, yeah, I mean, you could definitely rotate them.
Well, those orbs on the thermal videos, they had rotational tails around them, and it was moving in a vortex.
Yeah, they were perfect.
Right. It was moving in a vortex, so that would have been creating a vortex around it. And what's interesting is because they were kind of scanning back and forth, but also moving more or less in conjunction with the plane, like, in sync with it, there's a state of speed equilibrium that would be achieved. It's sort of like if you're driving a car on the highway and there's another car going the same speed next to you, right? And then you touch sides, it's not that bad of a collision. Right?
Yeah.
It's sort of the same deal when they're traveling the same speed, but also circling around it, because then there would be a true vortex. It wouldn't be ahead of it, it would be right there.
Man. I wonder what it would have been like in the cockpit of that thing, why those things are swirling around, because that static would have had to be thick. I mean, really thick. And then there'd have to be an accompanying magnetic field with it in order to create that vortex. So,
like Hollywood sometimes says the quiet part out loud, and it's so outrageous that you would never think in a million years it could be possible. I implore everyone listening, including you, Nathan, it's a good watch, if nothing else, right? It's on Netflix. I used to watch it when it was on regular TV. In fact, I used to pay for cable television just for this show, and once it was off the air, I canceled my cable. But it's called Manifest. Okay? You ought to watch it. You ought to watch it. It's basically this exactly to the T. In fact, they said they didn't call it ball lightning, they called it dark lightning.
Lightning.
And if you watch it, you'll be like, holy smokes, this is the stuff we talk about all the time. And like I said, it's like saying the quiet part out loud, and when you see it being played out in front of you, you're like, this is such an outrageous premise for a show. And it goes into the government conspiracy end of the thing, how they treat all the people on board, what ends up happening, what the pilots saw, and just like the spiritual aspect of it too, and some of the ramifications of actually going through. Like, it's crazy. It touches it all.
I'm going to have to see if I can't create a static ball of electricity. There's got to be a way.
Just compress it. Compress static with nowhere for it to go. If it doesn't have anywhere to go, it'll,
But I think the pressure would have to be positive pressure, wouldn't it?
I mean,
Negative pressure pulls out the energy and changes it.
I'm thinking. I feel like it's like a dual magnetic field situation where you have opposing magnetic fields, two of them, in the same area rotationally. I
So
think
do you
so.
think if I took a jar and I sealed it on both sides, but I put rods in both of them, and then had two air tubes that go in there and created the swirl, just get them to swirl ahead of time like a ram's horn, and then create the swirl so it has some kind of a vortex started, then put the electricity in there and let it spark over, you think we can get some kind of a swirl going on?
If you were to put, well, before you start with two straws, if you were to put one straw in at a glass at a 45-degree angle, you know, you were to put compressed air into it, you would definitely get rotational force.
That's what I'm saying.
And it would have to be, at a 45, but also pointed slightly into the direction of propagation, so it you know, has a flow direction. So, you know, you'd have depending on which side, top or bottom you put it in, would determine clockwise or counterclockwise, or which way it was facing would determine clockwise, counterclockwise, which way it's angled would determine, you know, its direction of propagation. Then you could get those vortexes. If you did two of them opposing each other, you'd have all sorts of havoc and shit.
Yeah.
Like wild havoc that, like, frankly, I'd love to see it. It's a very simple experiment to do. But I mean, then you'd have to have some kind of pressure purge at either end of it going on, because I mean, where would the air go and what would, you know?
Well, you could create two valves in there, one in, one out. That's fine.
Yeah, you could, right? It's just about isolating it. So it would have to hold in a certain predetermined amount of pressure at least before it starts sucking and purging.
That's what Jarvis said he's working on right now. So
That's really cool.
Yeah, it just kind of came to mind. That's the kind of experiment that you would have to do in order to prove that. You know what I mean? It has to be in air with positive pressure, with electrostatics, in order to pull it off.
You know what it sounds like, Nathan? I bet you remember this one. It sounds like two turbochargers 69ing each other.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. That's absolutely true.
Yep.
Huh. Interesting.
See, consistent throughout. That's how I like to be. Every episode, I talk about the same exact thing, just on another subject. Consistency.
I'm going to try that. I got that jar. I already cut out the bottom. I just got to put, the rod in there. All right. I'm going to have to glue that sucker up, give me some JB weld or something, get it to seal right. And then, I mean, the cap's easy. It seals pretty much already. It's just, Jarvis said it's in his patent. I'm going to have to look it up. Because we're not putting sand in it. That's why I didn't really think about it with Jarvis doing it. You know what I mean? That's what it was about charging sand. What we're talking about in electric. I can't even say the word. The electrics. But this is more of high voltage, zap it, Nathan, blow it up and find out, try it and find out kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, if you wanted to try that too in a more formal way, you could probably 3D print, like design and print something. You know what I mean? That would just make it like very plug and play. Hold on. I'm back. Sorry, he's barking at something.
No, it's all right. All right, we're gonna have to figure that one out because I already have that jar. It's already done. By the way, it took forever to cut that jar out.
I can imagine, man.
I didn't buy the right drill head, so I took a ball jar and I just was hitting the back of it. And you got to keep it wet, and you got to keep doing it. And I was using a little rough polishing stone, so it was taking forever to get through it. And then at the very end, of one, I forced it just a bit too much, and explosion.
Yep.
So I had to start over. But Yeah, that one was a pain to do. So I keep it special up to the side. I had meant to throw full on voltage to this thing and suck out the air. It was what the goal was when I built it. So then I can get the cool, plasma effects to go in there and stuff like that. I can put magnetic fields on the outside and start pulling plasma and making it move. Hey, maybe that's the trick. Maybe I need that magnetic field on that outside to
Possibly for compression. That's what I'm saying. I really think two magnetic fields that's flow.
Like an X, circular but an X.
Yeah, exactly. Circular but an X. You got okay. So you're on point with exactly where my head's going. So it's it'll have a compressive force, a rotational compressive force. It'll be moving in normal flow of propagation, but alternating in pressing ways.
Yeah, so it gets to the center, then it compresses inside the field. It builds in rotation. Yeah, right there. I got it.
It'll right in a state of ever compression as it moves through its flow. Yep. I think that's actually the trick generally to like when they're trying to do these cold fusion experiments that, like, frankly, I think they're going about it the wrong way, and that doesn't matter, but
we'll have to try that. It just sounds interesting. It sounds like a 1-day project that's interesting, you know what I mean? And then let it sit for a day or two, make sure everything's hardened up, and then light it up. At least we'll learn something, if not just an awesome effect.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, honestly, I think that whatever the result of that is going to be fun to watch, if nothing else.
Yes.
I think so. All right, Nathan. Well, it's been over 3 hours.
Yeah, I think it's about time too. I'm so exhausted. I haven't been getting good night's sleep lately because of these fires in California. So
I'm sorry, man. That's a rough thing to be in, and I'm sorry for the people that have been affected, and or in fear of it. It's a real thing, man. That's a hard thing to even watch on television. I can only imagine. Being at risk of it.
Anyway, well, we'll get back to the fun stuff. Anyway, all right, guys. I want to thank everybody in the chat. Joe, thank you very much for doing the show with me today and putting up with me. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man. It was a great episode, and I appreciate everybody and you, Nathan. Peace and love, everybody.
Oh, right on, man. All right, have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Catch you later.